Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast, is brought to you by you. If you want to learn how to support our podcast network, head to patreon.com/laststandmedia.
Hello, what is up? Welcome back to Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast. It's nice to be back with you. I missed last week, so I'm like 2 weeks deep now. It's nice to be back and shaking off the rust. Nice to be back with these two gentlemen. Let me waste no more time. Let me do some introductions. First, we have that twisted god that we call pal. See what I did there? David Scott Jaffe, everybody. What's up, Dave?
Well, what's up, fellas? How you doing?
What is going on with you here? What is happening?
I'm on my period, all right?
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
Well, someone's on their period around you, maybe more likely.
Zing!
Yeah.
Zing! No, I've been, we're at war. I'm prepping for war. I've been out there. All of us Democrats are out there fighting in the streets in the morning, getting ready, like learning how to throw a punch and take a punch. And, you know it is.
Oh, wow.
Ready.
Yeah, like a civil war.
I don't know how civil it's going to be.
Yeah.
But, yeah. No, I had a little bike accident. That's all.
What? I don't understand.
Come on, give us a straight
what is
scoop.
happening? I don't. Can you just what is going on with your face?
Is that some anti-Semitic comment?
Oh
what do you mean? Because the nose? Are you talking about the nose?
I can't do it anymore. It's been 2 minutes.
What do you look? I'm going to be doing lots of things you can't understand for the next couple months. We just lost an election.
Yeah.
Like a really bad election. Don't look to me for any kind of logical response to anything right now. I have blood on my face as a metaphor for something I don't fully understand. But I said, you know what I'm going to do before the show starts? I'm going to take a bunch of vampire blood left over from Halloween and splash it on my face. You know what's even better? About an hour into this podcast, we're going to take a break because I have to go to my therapist telehealth in order to get a re-prescription for my ADD meds. And I'm not going to have time to take this shit off. You think what else is she going to prescribe me after this fucking thing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But Kamala's not the president-elect. And so, you know what? You'll forgive me for some stage theatrical blood.
All right. Yeah. So you're dressed like a Sioux Indian. Very well.
Yeah, I'm dressed as all the aborted babies that'll be coat hangered sooner than later.
Oh boy.
God, where is your advertising minds? Like, we could have teased that out over the length of the episode. It would have been great for ratings.
Yeah, but that would have assumed I had thought about anything I do more than like a minute in advance. And no. But I'm That's well. Fair. I appreciate you guys having me. I hope you guys have been doing well. Let me say before we start the Politican. Holy shit, there's some good games out there right now. My goodness gracious, there's so many good fucking games to play. And I was talking to Dustin, and sounds like he's in with the rebattle for the Last Stand Media versus Gavin and Dagan's Call of Duty 6. All the money's going to charity. It's going to be a great cause. It's going to go to a charity that basically takes vets that come back home from various services and buy some game consoles, send them to places like PAX and things to kind of, deal with their depression, have them meet other gamers and stuff. So I'm real excited for it. We've been practicing because last time y'all kicked our asses terribly. And so this time we got esports coaches and everything. We're going to kick some fucking ass. But anyway, it's good to be here.
That sounds like a good distraction though, Jaffe. And I like that we could start things off, the proceedings, with a little positivity about other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
For what we're about to get into on this episode.
I think it's going to be a very positive episode.
I think it'll be a good episode. I think it's going to be a good episode.
But so like when we record on Zencastr, which is what we use to record our podcast, it's not the highest fidelity video because it's just sending it from cache straight to Zencastr. So we save it. And so the reason that I kept asking Jaffe what was going on with him is because I was like, there's multiple options, right? Jaffe maybe got horribly sunburned and I just didn't see something on the internet about announcing this. And I thought I was supposed to know. It could be that he got crazy with like a chocolate chip cookie, right? Or like a bunch of them, or like donuts, and it just got all over his face. It's not clearly
Your fidelity
reading
must
is
be
blood
really
to me. And if it's blood from someone's period, it better not be your own, is all I'm saying. Because that's fucking out of control.
Why can't I drink my own fluids and bathe in them?
Well, you could do whatever you want, I guess.
We are looking at
I don't think we're going to see you after that you go away for your
That's right.
Real quick, before we get into it, I wanted to say this real quick because I haven't been on Constellation in a while. I've been busy with other stuff. We have been so strapped because of what was going on with Dustin. I was needed elsewhere. So I appreciate people's patience on that. But also I've seen people saying like some people are upset we're not going to be doing 4 people all the time now. Some people like it, some people don't. That's totally fine. I just asked to give it a chance. The 4-person episodes, I think we're getting way too long.
They're long.
And I like this better. This feels like sacred symbols to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I didn't really make that choice. Like that was kind of a collective choice because we just don't have, especially with Dustin gone, Maddie and Cog are not available very often. Just people's schedules going on. It's just hard to even be able to draw in the appropriate amount of people. So I appreciate people's patience on that. Remember, Constellation began as a bi-weekly show and it is now a weekly show. It's way more than we ever thought it was going to be, and we appreciate its success. But just wanted to speak to that because I have seen people's feedback on that. But give us a chance. I think you'll enjoy these kinds of episodes just as much. I don't really understand why you'd want a 4th person necessarily because it just dilutes things in some sense, especially if that 4th person's like Dustin or something. You know, like I'm only kidding.
I got the joke and I smiled. I was waiting for Dagan to, and he didn't. And I'm like, shit, maybe people are going to take that serious. So I'm glad
they take
you
everything
clarified.
I say serious. Like nothing I say is not serious. So they'll definitely. I like reading Reddit threads sometimes about the tension on our shows. Like that come up very often. Like the tension, so much tension. What are you fucking talking about?
And of course, a man who needs no introduction. The man responsible for this whole fiasco, podcasting fiasco, family, whatever you want to call it, Colin Moriarty, the leader, one of the leaders of this soon-to-be uncivil war. I feel like you need a little intro.
I don't want to fight. I'm good. You know. But yeah, no, it's good to be here with you today. We had planned on doing this show weeks ago, so it was going to happen regardless. The only thing that I didn't even tell you guys this because I was just going to say it if it happened was I was like, if we don't know the answer, I don't want to do the show yet, but we have an answer, you know, and it was entirely possible we wouldn't have known. We could have had like a 2000-esque experience.
Sure. I thought that's how it was going to go, actually.
But it didn't. And so we knew pretty early that night. And so, yeah, we're here to do the episode today. And I hope people find it useful, regardless of what's said. I don't know what anyone's going to say or what's going to go on, but I want our political content to be targeted and behind an obvious barrier that you have to overcome in order to listen to it so that you're not upset that you're listening to political content. This was a big thing that I've been trying to do this fall. You know, people, I said this on Sacred that people had left Patreon after the election because we didn't say anything about one way or the other, like what we wanted to happen. And I'm like, I don't want to endorse anyone. I've never endorsed candidates. I voted for people.
People left Patreon like just a few days ago, less than a week ago.
Like one of the exit surveys was like, you know, I'm scared for the LGBTQ people in my life or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know what that has to do with me, but see ya, I guess, you know.
That's unusual.
So I've tried to, it's not that I said on the show, I'm like, I'm deeply political. I have opinions on everything, but I think that as I've gotten older, I've tried to be more selective about where it goes so that people have, because I've gotten more annoyed by the content I listen to as time has gone on, especially this time.
I hear that.
I don't give a fuck what my sports content people are voting. I don't give a fuck what anyone's doing. And I don't want to get it shoved down my throat constantly. So I've been much more mindful of that. And I think that's played out. But here, this is the space for that. So if you're clicking on this and listening to it, put on your big boy pants.
That's on you.
You got to put on your big boy pants.
That's on you.
Yeah, it really is. You know, so.
Well, listen, I'll tee it off briefly. Obviously, what we're talking about here in the U.S. and all over the globe. We're a couple of days postpartum. We had our election. Things went the way they went. Seems like a collective sort of mixture of resentment meets gloating out there right now, depending on which side of the aisle you're on, depending on how it came out for you personally. And I knew this was coming. And then Micah and Colin let me know during the week we're going to do our post-election sort of political episode, postpartum. You almost said
postpartum.
Postpartum. What happened? How do we feel? All that kind of thing. Now, I have thoughts, questions, predictions, even musings, all that kind of thing I'm a little less arguably politically engaged than these two fellas. So maybe I slip into the role of moderator a little bit. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to go, but I wanted to defer to Colin, sort of hand the reins to him briefly, just to get his sense of exactly, at least how he wanted to launch into the episode, and just see what your thought. Just kind of take stock. I'll see what your temperature is, but at least insofar as getting started, how you want to head into this journey. But I think there's a lot to say. We represent a pretty broad band, just the three of us. I know we wanted to maybe get Chris on as well, but just being the three of us with the new model, I think we represent a nice range.
Yeah, and it's worth noting we did open this up to a fourth, but we couldn't find a taker, which I don't blame. Like Gene didn't want to do it. Gene's in a precarious position.
He's busy also.
Well, yeah, but he also works for the Post, and I don't think
that's true.
I don't think it's even appropriate for him to do this close to the election.
Sure.
But he just didn't want to do it. Maddie's not political. Cog's not political. So we didn't even ask them. They wouldn't want to do it anyway. Chris had other obligations to there. I think he would have done it. In some sense, I'm glad he's not here because I think it would have made the show more unbalanced. I think it would have been interesting, but Jaffe and him are pretty much on the same page. So it might have been a little more.
I could call Grums if you want.
Yeah, get Grums on here so he can make more things up and, fight against his own cause in every single way, completely and effectively. So yeah,
Kyle, before I hand it over to you,
okay, yeah,
I'm just going to say from my part, okay, I'll tell you one thing I am grateful for, that it's over, however it turned out for us, right, regardless, win or lose. And it's just, I love seeing that. I mean, when you're going through it, when we were really through it, and we were down in Georgia Tuesday night, flying home from one swing state to the other home to our home swing state, from GA to PA, right? And just seeing what it was like down south, seeing what it was like up here in the Northeast. But there's no better time, maybe the wrong choice of words. There's no more clear of a time where it's like, wow, everything is so divided. It's so polarized. You know what I mean? There's so much division in this country. So I'm grateful that we get to peel off the bumper stickers, put the lawn signs back in the attic.
Did you have a lot of people with lawn signs in your neighborhood?
Oh, dude, it was like...
I did this year, too.
That's how I really knew how it was going to go before it even went. Because even out here in Bucks County, which is a big, I know.
Dude, it's crazy that you live in... Just real quick.
Yeah.
Bucks County is arguably one of the most important counties in the entire country.
It's insane.
About determining the election. And
it's insane.
Yeah. So it's cool that you live there,
And, I had people texting me all night, hey, come on, Bucks County, that kind of stuff. But I could have told, and some people were, on the right saying that, and some people on the left. I have family and friends on all over the place politically, right? All over the spectrum. But I did tell all of them, I said, it's a lot less purple here and a lot more red than I've ever seen it. It used to be, if this was even 4 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, there would have been a Harris sign for every Trump sign. And you really couldn't tell. It was so deeply purple. But I would say it was probably two Trump signs for every one Harris sign. I mean, it was that much bent towards the red this time.
Dude, my neighbors, the houses are staggered where I live. So it's like, house, like in these little diagonals. And the two people in front of me, well, I'm friendly with both of them, all Trump signs in their yard, all Harris signs in their yard. And like the different Senate candidates and stuff. And when you would walk out my door, you would just see it. And it was so funny, like just a perfect visual. I actually took a picture of it because I was like, oh, this is funny.
And Virginia came out blue this time.
Well, Virginia's always blue, but it was in recent memory because the bureaucrats live here. Mm-hmm. The state is red. Like I live in a deeply red county. Our congressman is Republican. He got elected by like 10 points. It's like Fairfax County, Loudoun County, where all the Washington, D.C. people live, and Richmond are the blue. So the thing is, and I was telling Micah this is, and we can get a little bit into it. I knew it was going to, I thought Trump was going to win the entire time, basically, but I thought it was basically a coin flip weighted a little bit. And I'll get into that. So I didn't think it was going to be like, definitely. I thought it was like 60-40, and I kind of felt that way the entire time. And I thought this idea that Harris was going to win was dubious. And I thought that Harris was going to win big was like impossible. And I'll get into that. So I was a little surprised by people's interpretation of those things, but
Yeah, for my part, I'm just happy we could get back to the business of being neighbors again.
Yeah.
And you know me, if you listen to the podcast, you know me. That's what I'm all about. Where can we compromise? Let's put aside our differences. Let's give it the old college try, regardless of how it turned out for us. I will say I've never voted Republican. You got to go into this thing with the right spirit. You know what I mean? Hope for the best. And that's honestly how I look at it. And but Kyle, I want to hand over the yoke to you because I want to know how you want to launch into this thing. Which direction do we go in?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to defer to Jaffe, I think, to go first because I am more curious about what you guys think. I don't know that I have anything super unconventional to say. I think it's fairly obvious what happened. I don't know that you can even avoid it at this point, so we can get into all of that, but it doesn't require much dissection from my perspective, in my opinion. But what I was saying to Micah about Virginia was a red state for a long time. And we had noticed, and I had noticed, because this is the second cycle I've lived here. And we don't watch TV really, but we watch a lot of sports. So we have that on for football, typically, hockey sometimes, but football mostly. And there were tons of political ads, tons of them. Usually you would get them for like your Senate candidate, maybe. We have off-season gubernatorial races in Virginia. Like our gubernatorial race is next year. So you have a bunch of ads for that when that happens. So you're used to that kind of stuff, but lots of presidential ads, especially a lot of Harris ads. And the way I interpreted that was I was like, they're nervous about Virginia. They shouldn't be. It's crazy that they are because they have all of the people that work in their administration living in Virginia, basically, and all their families and friends and all the downstream effect of that. It's crazy. I mean, if you look at the map, if you just cut those two counties out, it would be over. Like you could keep Richmond. It still wouldn't matter. It would be ruby red. But I started seeing those ads and I was like, they're playing defense here. And what I ended up realizing, and so I was saying to Micah, I'm like, what's going to happen next time? Because this was close in Virginia. It wasn't that close. It was like 2.5 or 3 points, but it's pretty close. Like a real diminishment of the way Biden did here. Biden easily won. Virginia wasn't even a question. And Clinton did too. I was like, 2028 is going to be a fucking nightmare here. Because now the Republicans are going to play offense in this state. And they're going to canvass. You had canvassers, I'm sure, in your neighborhood. You must have been covered with people in your neighborhood coming and knocking on doors. And I was like, we don't really deal with that. They're not spending that much money here. But I'm like, next time it's going to be bad here. And that's one of the takeaways I had from the election was I was like, I think the Republicans kind of scared the shit out of the Democrats in certain states. Not that they were going to win, but it's like New Jersey. 4.5 points? Long Island obviously is deep red.
Yeah.
You look at that, it went even further to the red. It's just stuck in New York. It should be its own state. It's fucking annoying. And I've always felt like that.
So many people.
And it should be its own state. It's ridiculous that it's part of New York. I hate it. And so New Jersey, New Mexico, New Hampshire, just kind of interesting reactions. The entire country, 49 out of 50 states and DC, all went to the right. Harris didn't outperform Biden anywhere. Trump won the popular vote by several points.
Incredible.
It's a complete repudiation of what these people have been selling. And there is a lot to it, but I think it's fairly obvious that everything they tried to do just made it worse for them. And it became transparent what was happening to Donald Trump. And they somehow turned him into a victim in some ways, which I think really helped him. But I think mostly what it is that people just saw what was in front of them. Bad economy that everyone says is good, but isn't. And everyone knows that. So like it just, because they're talking about the stock market. But when you're just like a teacher making $45,000 a year, you don't have stocks and you go to the supermarket and you have no money when you walk out.
Right.
And that's what they see. And that's the way they interpret the economy. It doesn't matter. And just a repudiation, I think, and some social issues too. But I'm more interested in like what the interpretation is of you guys as people who I assume voted for Harris. What you guys think about what happened and why? Because the one thing I was surprised about, Jaffe, I remember you saying that you were positive that she was going to win, right? Or she was definitely going to win. And I remember thinking, it's like anything's possible. I remember telling you my earnest thing was, I was like, this resets the race. It's a coin flip now, It's definitely resetting
when
the
she
rate.
came in after
Right.
Biden. Yeah.
Right. Biden was going to lose, and Biden was going to lose bad. And I think if Biden stayed in, actually Trump would have run up the score in a way that we haven't seen since the 80s.
I agree.
And would have been really generationally bad for the Democrats. And so I think that they made the right decision. They just didn't make it in time. And they picked a bad candidate, the wrong candidate. Understand one thing. Kamala Harris is a mediocrity. She's nothing. And she does, as I was telling people in my life, she doesn't exist. You don't know anything about her. You don't know what she feels about anything. She didn't do anything. She's unremarkable in every way. It's a construct. And do you guys watch Veep by chance?
No, I never really got into
everyone
it.
tells me I should, but
oh my God, it's so fucking funny. The main character is Selena Meyer, right? Played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. If the parties were reversed, people would have obsessively talked about how that person is that person.
Mm.
And what I kept saying to people in my life is like, we can't have Selena Meyer as president of the United States. Just an empty vessel of nothing. No remarkable anything about her. She's not academically gifted. She wasn't legally gifted. She's not electorally gifted. She's not orally gifted. Well, maybe Willie Brown has something to say about that. Maybe she is a little orally gifted. But
kind of a tailor-made vice president.
That was a joke, by the way. I guess it didn't really land.
I got it, but it's fascinating that we're gonna attack her sexual escapades, but not his. But that's fair.
I was just a joke. I don't really give a shit.
No, I know. I know you don't. But the fact that there's a lot of people out there that actually went there with her and assume that I mean, anything's fair game, fine. Mm. But if you're going to open that can of worms on her and refuse to open it on Trump, not you, but the collective people out there that were commenting, it's like, okay, I don't know whether to just ignore you because you're not serious and educated about this, or you're just a misogynist asshole, but not your joke. But and
I think that like there is an unknown component of misogyny and racism. Sure. But I don't know. And this is the way I felt about Hillary too. It's like, I'm not sure that that's what did it.
I don't think that was the main
especially
thing
the race, especially the race part. I just don't think mattered. I actually think maybe being a woman is worse from the perspective of the per capita person than being a black person. And you saw that with Obama,
So
I think that kind of erased that entire idea that it really had to do with her race. I think it might have had more to do with her gender, but I don't even think it was that. I just think Trump's a weak candidate and a vulnerable candidate. Profoundly. You're not going to get a weak. Can you imagine what MAGA is going to turn into now that he's going to not run it and not be able to run anymore? Now you're going to have real people, that you're going to have to deal with that frankly bodied a lot of people on the other side in this election, including people like JD Vance, And so it's like you kind of squandered it when really the thing that the Democrats should have done is to ensure Biden never ran again. It was preposterous that he ran again.
Yeah.
And I knew that the entire time. I kind of liked it because I didn't like Biden. And I was like, yeah, that's great. I didn't personally think Trump really was going to become the nominee until it was clear maybe in 2023. But at the time it was unknown. And I'm like, yeah, I'd love a DeSantis to run against Biden. That will be a fucking bloodbath. And it would have been.
I think it would have been.
And by the way, if DeSantis was running in this election, it would have been a bloodbath. Like way worse than it was now. But that's the whole point is that they picked the empty vessel.
But that's an interesting point too, though, Colin. And I know we all know this, but of course, you have to say she inherited this 0 hour-ish mess also. And I still don't know how I feel about Kamala. I want to get Jaffe's thoughts on her specifically. And I honestly, probably even going into the polls, a little ignorant on everything about her. But for me, it was just like voting for Hillary. It was just like, I can't bring myself to vote for Donald Trump. It's just like voting. It's a defensive vote. You're talking about offense and defense. It's a defensive vote.
Well, but that's the whole thing is, and I've been telling people this because like I voted for Trump, and it was the first time I ever did. But I voted against Harris. I actually wasn't really voting for Trump.
That's interesting.
And if one way is fine, then the other way's got to be fine too, And I looked at this and I was like, I'll take the known quantity over this, which is nonsense. It's like. It bothered me that we all knew she was a joke. Everyone knew that. You can go and read the articles in every periodical and newspaper about how she shouldn't run. She got wiped out in 2019 when she tried to run. Presidential candidates pick weaker people to be their VP so they're not outshone by them, and it was clear. And I don't like the focus on the DEI candidate kind of thing. That's not what I mean, but it's like she was chosen for those reasons. That's why you have a weak candidate. And then when you live by the sword, you have to die by the sword. So when you have a VP candidate that now steps up to the plate, it's like, we can't get rid of the black woman. Like that's not gonna wash. We can't do that. And so that's how she got chosen in that specific position. There should have been a primary, because the reality is that there are multiple candidates in the Democratic orbit that would have beaten Trump, even with 100 days to go. And they just weren't chosen. They weren't even given a chance. Now, I'm of the mind that they are thrilled that she lost. And this is the 4D chess part of it, and why I think Shapiro didn't really want to run with her and all of the rest. It's like her running and winning ruins their prospects of ever having federal office. So there is a lot of 4D weird Machiavellian shit going on behind the scenes. That's why you saw Joe Biden come out the day after looking like happy as a pig in shit. Like there's all sorts of weird puppet string Machiavellian nonsense palace intrigue going on. And that's like above and beyond anything I really even care about. But I just think it was like the Clinton situation where you chose a weak candidate, but the problem is you chose an even weaker candidate than Clinton. That's the crazy part. Clinton had accomplishments. Clinton went to Yale. Yeah. She did all these crazy things
she was
about
tough.
Like, yeah, she did find herself in this particular position because of who she was married to and by virtue of all these things and running for the Senate and all. There's no doubt. And Secretary of State, but she was capable. I truly do not believe that Harris was even capable of the job. And I'm not entirely sure her heart was even in it to run for the job. And she's just a blank slate. And it's a complete repudiation of that. They just should have run someone else. So that's like my opinion on it. It's like, it's not even about, there's a lot about Trump to like, I think, and there's a lot not to like. And I think a lot of the policy works for me. But really, I'm like, I'm not. I felt bad sitting out last time. I didn't vote last time. I didn't like that I did that. And this time.
Oh, that was last time, Kyle? The previous
yeah, like in
election?
2016, I voted for Gary Johnson. In 2020, I just didn't vote.
Okay. I remember now. Okay.
And this time, I'll say from what I would consider a reluctant Trump stance, which is what I probably kind of had. Two things gave me permission to vote for him in some sense. When they started legally going after Trump, I was like, this is obviously bullshit. And there's more to this, especially the stuff that happened in New York State and so on and so forth. And the second, so that was like, that kind of started running into my head like, well, this is now a machine politics situation. And the second thing is nominating Harris. When Harris became the nominee, I'm like, there's just absolutely no way. So
I want to see if Jaffe disagrees here.
Yeah, go ahead.
But
no, so I've said a lot. I want to hear from Jaffe. I want to sit back and hear from him.
Yeah, I'm going to hand this over to Jaffe. But even if Harris was, now this is to me, and Jaffe may disagree, but even if she was this wildly dynamic candidate that you could really get behind and get wildly enthusiastic about, how would we know? Because the Democratic campaign that was waged was so weak. It was so weak to me. I mean, as a lifelong I'm only 50 years old, but I mean, as a lifelong Democrat, that candidate, it was like I was gleaning like for something to hold on to, like what does she stand for? And maybe again, I'm only partially engaged. I don't know what percentage. So I'm not like one of these political pundit podcasters or anything like that. But to me, it was like, I didn't even know. That was the biggest takeaway for me. It was like, I haven't been excited about a candidate since 2008 with Obama. And you could argue that was, either that was great for us or letdown. Doesn't matter. That's the last time I got in. That was I cast an offensive vote, right? It was like, I'm voting for this person, not against the other person. So, but Jaffe, I know you're even further to the left than I am.
Yeah.
And I really want to get your take on her, especially on everything. But especially on her.
It's a big buffet. So where do we want to start? If you want my take on her, I liked her. I liked her in the primaries. I mean, she didn't last very long, but I don't know if I can stand by the assumption that she stood for nothing. I mean, I was doing a stream the other day and people were like, I think if there's a talking point out there that has worked for people of like, we don't even know what she stood for and what her policies are. And I'm like, well, you do though. You may not like them and that's fair. But the idea when she talked about, small business loans, taxing people who make over $400,000 in order to pay for the small business loans, first-time home buyers. There were, all you had to do was go to her website or watch her debates or watch some of her interviews and go, oh, okay, these are the policies that she's proposing. Or you could go over to Trump's campaign and see, Agenda 47. And if you agree with that, that's great. But the idea that she was just this cipher and I don't know where that, again, I respect the fact you may not, or somebody may not agree with what she was proposing, but the idea that she was just this empty vessel to pour in, to me, that's, I didn't find that. So I don't know. And even in the stream the other night, when we were talking about it, when a lot of people who were engaged were saying, well, what about this plan of hers? What about this plan of hers? People in the stream were like, oh yeah, I didn't know that. And I'm like, well, okay. And I blame the Democrats for that. I mean, my whole take on this thing is, whether they should have run her or not, I don't have the understanding of the process regarding, because my understanding was there was a lot of fundraising money. And if they wouldn't have run her and they would have primaried, which they probably may or may not have had the kind of time they needed, but whatever, maybe they would have, but they would have had to start from scratch with the fundraising, all of that. And maybe that's not true, but that's what I heard.
It is true. But the problem with that is that like they're from Democratic people. All you would have had to do is ask them for it again. That's like that's the hurdle. It's not that it was gone.
If you're talking Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, but if you're talking, the lady who sent in $10 to Biden,
that's true. But also that's where most of the money came from, because she obviously had many, many more billionaires giving her way, way more money than the other side. And so like, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to say that is true. That they would that was part of the strategy. I think that was a huge mistake.
It may have been, but that. So I mean, at least as people listening to factor in, it wasn't just, hey, let's run the vice president who happens to be a black woman. Did that factor in? I'm sure it did, but there were other aspects to it that I think made them make the decision they did. But regardless though, let's put it this way. I think she would have been a much better president than Trump was or will be. Simply because I think my vote, like yours, Dagan, it's not that I was like, she's amazing, I'm inspired to vote for her. But I think whatever the opposite feeling of that was how I feel about Trump. And so I was like, yeah, let's run defense. I don't give a fuck. You guys are more football than I am, but I don't know who the new hotness is in the quarterback world. But I don't give a fuck who their quarterback is. We're going to put the biggest, baddest motherfucker up there to block him. And he ain't throwing shit and he ain't running shit. That was what my vote was, because that's how much I think Trump is a fucking nightmare. But I will tell you though, what has been eye-opening in a good way and a disturbing way is, and again, here's the difference between far left people or far progressives like me and far right people like some of these nuts on the internet and stuff. I don't have any evidence to suggest the election was rigged. Have I heard things? Sure. Have I heard, weird conversations about Musk and Trump and Putin, blah, blah, blah. And then there was, whatever. But the difference is I have the ability to go, yeah, Jaffe, but because this election loss was so emotionally painful, you have to factor in the fact that you are psychologically biased and you're going to look for anything that will fill the narrative in a way that makes you feel better. Right. Whereas a lot of people last time were just like, it was rigged. And it's like, well, you didn't have evidence of it really, just like I don't have evidence of it. But But let's assume the votes that came in were the votes that were cast, and that's the story. Okay, fine. And I'm not going to push back on that until, look, I don't think Harris would have conceded as fast as she did if they really had some evidence that, wait a minute, something fishy's going on.
Sure.
I think it was like, yeah, no, we lost. Okay. So what I think has been interesting to me for this, not what I think, I know it's been interesting to me, but is the idea of going, okay, the people, like it was, you get a lot of different reasons people say they voted for Trump, right? And the economy, and I agree with Colin on this, is that, if you were to listen to the Democrats, and my stocks are doing great. They were doing great when Biden was in office, when Trump was in office. And hey, now that Trump's coming back into office, the last 3 days have been amazing for the stock market. Time to buy Bitcoin, boys, that as well. So, but I agree, the teacher making 40K probably is not really all that invested in what's happening with, the Halliburton stock or whatever the fuck, So, and I do go to the grocery store, and the other day I did come home with a normal box of Frosted Rice Krispies, and it wasn't the big family size. It was just the littlest one of the small ones, but it's like a normal size. $6.65 to buy a goddamn box of cereal.
Ridiculous.
So on one hand, when the Democrats were saying the stock market is great, unemployment is down, inflation is down, you go, oh, well, what are these people talking about the economy talking about? But I think if you voted for Trump primarily because of the economy, and I would like to believe and I don't mean the people who want to add on a room to their house or get a summer home. I mean the people who are struggling to feed their family, struggling to keep their kids in a school district, that is good for their kids, struggling, whatever. As much as I think Trump is a fucking nightmare that may very well do things that are irreversible negatively for America, I think I can appreciate that vote in the same way that I vote for any candidate that's going to promote LGBT rights, because in the same way I protect my family and my kids, I have to assume if you're voting for the economy, even though I don't have the education to look at something like tariffs and counter what the economists are saying, that the tariffs are going to be bad for our taxes and they're going to be bad for all kinds of things. And that's not the message that they got out there. And the Democrats did a terrible job of countering the message that the tariffs are going to be good. And so those people, I can go, okay, I understand. I don't like how you voted, but I get it, because you're probably in the same mindset as I am about protecting your kids and family. The difference is I don't have to, the $6.50 Rice Krispies are a pain in my ass. It's stupid, but it doesn't really bother me. I didn't think about it afterwards other than an anecdote for a podcast.
Yeah.
Whereas there are people out there that are like, I have to make decisions between food and medicine. Right. So, but so in that sense, this time around, I'm a little less, like I'm able to look at those people as fellow Americans and go, I get it, right? It's the ones though, and I think the Democrats did a terrible job, because if they are right that the economy is better, then they did a terrible job messaging. And if the economy isn't better, then Kamala did a terrible job distancing herself from the policies that, while I don't think she was responsible for, how often is the vice president sitting around making these kinds of decisions? Very, very rarely. But ultimately, they did a bad job of extracting her from that perception, right? 100%. So they ran a terrible campaign in that sense.
Yes.
But it's the ones, though, and here's where I get worried about the election, and this is the last two things I'll say about it, is I don't know how many of the people, in the same way that people may not have voted for her, but it may not have been massive because she was a woman and she was a woman of color. Was it meaningful? Sure. Was it big meaningful? I don't know. The same way the social issues, Trump out and out lied about all kinds of things on the social issues. And those have become, for a lot of people, the truth now. when he said things like kids are going to school and they're coming home and it's like, I changed my gender and my dick got cut off in the 4th grade. I mean, it's just things that are simply not even close to being accurate. As Dagan, I know it's been kind of a talking point, but it's accurate. If your kids go to the nurse at school and say, I have a headache, you have to have sent a note saying they can take a fucking Tylenol.
Right.
Right. The idea that, oh yeah, I went to the nurse's office and she chopped my dick off. And then I went to the library and got a copy of Catcher in the Rye. It was a good day, Ma. I mean, what the fuck but that level of, I don't, and I saw a guy on Twitter this morning going into like a Mexican restaurant with his Trump shirt and just being all inflammatory and calling him, names and stuff. That's what plays in the media. Right. And I want to hope, for the sake of just everyone, that group that voted for Trump because of that is a very vocal minority, and it doesn't represent most Republicans out there. But I don't really have that data, but I'm hopeful, because I think most people fundamentally are just trying to get by and have a good life, and they don't hate other people. But I think the Democrats also did a bad job on that when it comes to going, look, what this guy is saying is categorically untrue. And we understand why you would be concerned, because he's saying horrifying things. But let us show you. And it's a messaging thing. I mean, it's very easy to sell the simple message. It's hard to sell a nuanced message. People aren't interested, and they don't have the time, and they don't have the bandwidth, and I don't blame them. So and the last thing I'll say is that the abortion thing, I mean, the fact that a bunch of fucking white women, 51% of white women voted for this man, again, maybe because of the economy, that I get, but the fact that everywhere, including Florida, where it didn't pass, but not because it wasn't the majority, clearly, I think what it means is Trump won because of the economy. And there's that trope that all these pundits always say about it's the economy stupid. I forget who it was who coined that, but that's kind of
James Carville.
Yeah. And I think it's like the hierarchy of needs, right? It's like you can be all up and down with all these moral stances, but fundamentally, as much as you may love America and patriotism and freedom and this, that, and the other, it's about, can you keep the lights on and feed your family? And so I get that he may have won on that and run on that. But the abortion thing and a lot of other very progressive propositions that passed all over the country, or almost passed, like in the case of Florida, where 57% of them said they wanted to change the law, but oops, sorry, it wasn't 60%. I think that does suggest, and we have a openly trans person in Congress for the first time. Alabama, the Supreme Court said, your gerrymandering stuff is bullshit. Even the fucking current Supreme Court, which I think is ridiculous. And now Alabama has an extra congressperson who happens to be a black guy. There was a lot of good progressive progress made, but it's easy to have that loss when you've got a guy. And we'll get to this later, because I want to get y'all's take on this. But the real danger with this is how much of the talking points from the left are indicative of a true worrying state of affairs for the next 4 years and maybe beyond, and how much of that was bluster and performative. When you've got a lot of the people who worked for Trump before saying this guy's a nightmare, he wants to send the National Guard out and the military against American citizens who are protesting. Is that true? Is it not true? That's something I think, whatever side of the fence you're on, that should be a concern to people. So that's my take as of now. I'm sure I'll have more to say, but that's my response.
Yeah, it's well said, Jaffe. I mean, I have to echo what you said. I think it's really important. And I saw this a lot, even with people, my own friends and family. Again, like represent my friends and family, the people that are closest to me represent like a pretty wide political swath, pretty wide spectrum. And I know people who voted for Trump on the economy, and they have my empathy, because you're voting for the, high prices, inflation. You go to the gas pumps, you go to the grocery store, you see the astronomical insurance prices for auto. My home insurance just went up again. Like, it's hard for people. And even the, you always hear that thing, that political jargon of like people that don't know policy, they're just voting to get, take care of their families, and they're uneducated and they just need to put the bread on the table. I think a lot of people do know policy, but they can't afford themselves the luxury to vote on policy when they're worried about making ends meet.
Yep.
That's the other. And so that really does elicit my sympathy and my empathy. And I understand voting for Trump out of complete exasperation on that. I think it takes a special person to look past that, or, afford themselves a luxury to say, all right, I'm going to tough it out under the Democrats again, and maybe things will get better. And you know what? Also, it is short-sighted on the Democrats' part, which is a big disappointment for me, because I really still believe in the party, or the potential of the party, is that it feels like the Democrats are so disconnected when you're telling people that are suffering, no, you're okay because it's better now. But better means that gas is now $4.50 a gallon instead of $5.
Right.
You know what I mean? It just makes you feel disconnected, like you're, and oftentimes they do have the luxury. I watch the New York Times podcast, and it does feel like a lot of those people, Ezra Klein and all those guys, I think they're really smart, but sometimes they just feel like they're in a bubble, and they feel disconnected from the everyday person. And I think that's not what the Democratic Party is supposed to represent. What happened here?
Well, real quick, I heard one of the talking heads say, and this blew my mind. They said they were going around the country talking to undecideds, and they were in a union hall, and I think in Philadelphia somewhere. And the guy, he's like talking to these guys about why you're undecided, and they're like, the economy. And he's like, but what they didn't even seem to realize was the very union jobs they have existed because of the Biden infrastructure bill that was signed the first year he was in. Those jobs were created under that bill, which doesn't mean they should have voted for him necessarily. But you're right about the idea that the bandwidth, and that if you do this for a living, or you do it tangentially for a living, kind of like what we're talking about on this podcast, sure. But the bandwidth to know this and study, it's like, I'm going to work all day and bust my ass and worry about my family. And now I'm going to come home, and instead of watching a football game or watching some fucking Disney Channel shit with my kids, let me turn on, Democracy Now! Or PBS NewsHour, or watch somebody on YouTube, and really, it's like, fuck you. And that's why I do think the Republicans message better these days, because whether it's conscious or not on their part, their message is a lot easier to hit and land.
Yes.
And that's part of the job. And I do think the Democrats dropped the ball there. So,
you know what, Jaffe, too, like what really struck me, especially just in the last 2 or 3 days, since everything came down, since everything came out in the wash, just listen to the various podcasts on both sides of the political spectrum, and just really realizing like the now Democratic Party's lack of timely introspection. Like, why did you think it was going to go well 6 months ago, even running Biden out there, when, how did you not know that was going to be a disaster, when I'm half an idiot politically? I have not a political strategic bone in my body, but I knew that was a bad idea, but you didn't. And now I see the hand wringing. Now I see everybody throwing their hands up. We made a mistake, but that's a very odd thing for me. And the other thing I'll say is, and this may be sort of specific to my sort of perception or my immediate atmosphere or my environment, but I did see a troubling amount of people on both sides of the coin, blue and red, sort of towing a party line with this election and allowing themselves no nuance. And that's always a troubling thing for me. But I did see that a lot this time.
Isn't that always the case? Do you think there's ever been an election in America where it's about, for most people, nuance? I mean, that's the Republicans get that these days. The Democrats don't. And it's, if you look at who votes Democrat, they're usually college educated. And that doesn't mean they're better. That doesn't mean they're smarter, but they're more educated. And the more educated you get, the more nuanced thinking and critical thinking you do naturally, because that's sort of what you get trained in that process. And it's harder. That's why there's no real talk radio for the left, because it's hard to throw the left blue meat because it's like, well, wait a minute, let me, it's a lot more difficult there. And I don't know how you solve that, but I think they have to figure out a way to solve it, because if not, they're going to just keep getting their lunch eaten by these guys.
Yeah, I think it's true. I do wonder, I mean, before I toss it back to Colin, I mean, again, I have a special sort of privilege, I think, because I live in a very normally a very purple area, and a very interesting, diverse mix of blue collar and white collar. Also, my county, Bucks County, just north of Philly, which is, Philadelphia proper, notoriously Democratic, which was, again, strange that, Harris was stumping there at the art museum, knowing full well she was going to have Philadelphia. I thought that was weird. But Bucks County specifically, it's a very diverse mix of people, socioeconomically, with their careers, racially even. And despite those vast differences, there were people on both sides of the political coin, all stripes, sort of towing a party line. People that I love and people that I'm very fond of. And it's like, wow, you're not even examining, you're not even looking into this a little bit. You know what I mean? You're just kind of going on whatever, little things, and you're going on history. And it felt a little selfish to me. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not judging. Everybody's got to vote on something. Yeah, and I get that.
It's a place of privilege. It sucks that it's a place of privilege to be able to vote. Yeah. It sucks it's a place of privilege to be able to vote in this country. It sucks that it's a place of privilege to have the time and the bandwidth to actually think about it in a more nuanced way. It's easier, not easier like people are stupid, but it's easier because people are fucking busy with their lives. Sometimes out of pure necessity. They're not going to, getting the nuanced take on things requires an interest in those things and an understanding of why they should be interesting to you. And we don't do that so well. We're terribly educated across both sides when it comes to stuff like this. Social media and cable news has made it so much worse. So, I get your point. I think your anecdotes are absolutely reflective of the country in general, if you were to somehow figure out a way to take the data on that. But I think I can't blame those people so much as I blame the system that's created those people. America is now number 23. We used to be like in the top 10 of happiest countries. We've almost dropped out of the top 25.
That's incredible.
We don't create.
I think we're still too happy now. I want us to be less happy even than we are right now. There's too much happiness.
Stick around. 4
more
years. I
want us to be like Hungary.
Yeah, well, we'll be both. We'll be like Hungary and Hungry. But
I never knew this.
Yeah, but I mean, seriously, it's like we offer very little in the way of a way out of the dog eat dog world. We have some money, all three of us. We're not super, I don't know how much we all make collectively, but we're not worried about how am I going to feed the kids this weekend, or should we have kids because can we afford them in this economy, And that's a privilege that frees us up to think about these things. But, the more you see elections like this, and breaks my heart a little bit, the more you see how divided the country is, and the more you see how people are hurting. I understand certainly the people who are hungry, but I was thinking about, my son came out as trans when he was 14, and it's very selfish to be grateful for the fact that he's 18 now. So he's not going to get hit by any of these possible proposed, or these definitely proposed, possibly past ideas of what kids can get in terms of gender affirmation. But there's imagine a kid, 14 in Iowa who's really conflicted and confused. And instead of being able to sit down with a doctor and get some real nuanced advice and guidance, it's just that door is now shut. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And it applies to a woman who needs an abortion, or it applies to anybody who's going to now have to deal with some of this stuff, or someone who just can't afford to feed their family. It's heartbreaking that we are so easily manipulated because we don't have social safety nets meaningful enough that, I can afford to, I'm going to go vote. I don't care if you fire me because it's important, or I'm going to go I'm sick, I'm taking time off or whatever. It's just, we don't treat our citizens as well as we should. And we get, this is what I think. I'll shut up for a while. You guys go.
No,
Kyle, I got to toss it back to you on this one.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, we know how you voted. You're always very transparent when it comes to that.
I don't give a shit what people think about that. It's like, I'm allowed to vote however I want. I'm not telling you how to vote, like it's just my own personal opinion. And I have, so anyway, go ahead.
And I like hearing about Richmond and the burbs and how it turned out, how it looked over there, because I haven't been there in a while. So I wasn't even there to see the campaign signs on lawns and things to get a feel of what it was like out there. But what did you make of Harris? What did you make of Trump? What did you make of the race, the political sort of war waged on both sides, the campaigns? You already said you weren't surprised at the outcome. I think a lot of people saw the writing on the wall.
I was surprised by how confident people were in Harris. I was like, there's no evidence that you should be this confident. That was the thing. And that's what I kept saying to people. Cause I was like, of course, everyone knows I love politics. So it's kind of like, who's going to win? Who do you think? You get text messages from random people like, who do you think's going to win and stuff. And I'm like, dude, I don't know, but here's what I know, right? Biden is profoundly unpopular. The economy is perceived as being in horrible shape. Inflation is up 20% since Biden took office. Horrifying. And by the way, will never go away. It's important for everyone to understand that. And the way inflation is talked about, and this is kind of getting in the Jaffe's idea of people not knowing enough or not needing more information or whatever, is like, I feel like the powers that be prey on people's ignorance on the scene. Like, inflation's down. And it's like, no, the rate of inflation is down. And those are two different things, aren't they? Because the only way you ever get that money back is by going into a deflationary cycle, which is awful for the economy. And thus, these price increases are permanent. You're never going to get your normal Jaffe. You're never going to get that box of cereal at that old cost ever again. It's over.
Yeah, just you wait. I'll get that's what I'm going to run on.
And so I think that it's like I said earlier, and the polling, none of the polling indicated that Harris should have been confident. That was the thing where I felt like I was almost being gaslit. Where I'm like, the polls show this as being really close in all the swing states and Trump even winning the popular vote. And we all know the polls don't count Trump voters properly traditionally. So I have no idea why people were so bullish. And the early vote, finally, the GOP was like, no, we don't like this game, but we'll play it. And we're going to encourage, and we're not going to outvote you. We're just going to cut hardcore into your numbers. And when I saw that Pennsylvania's firewall when Biden barely won in 2020 was like 100,000 or so, or no, it was 1.1 million. He had a firewall in the early vote and they won by 100,000 or whatever it was, or 80,000.
Incredible.
The firewall was down to 400,000. And I was like, she's going to definitely lose Pennsylvania. I was saying that before because Mike Patelli, a friend of the show, was talking to him and, he was nervous or whatever about things. And I'm like, I just don't see how these numbers result in her winning Pennsylvania. It doesn't even make any sense. And turns out that it didn't make any sense. Sometimes like the emperor has no clothes. Like a lot of these people are truly partisan or ignorant. Because it's like, dude, the most accurate pollster in 2020 was a random firm called Atlas. Did you guys ever hear about these guys?
I don't know.
And no one was paying attention to their numbers because they are like a Brazilian firm and it's just like this weird thing. And they just happened to be totally right in 2020. And then they were dead ass right this time.
Oh, interesting.
And it's like, and they were showing Trump winning easily. And everyone was kind of discounting that. Meanwhile, you had like the Seltzer poll in Iowa that famously showed Harris winning by 3 points and she lost by 11. So even partisan friendly pollsters that were trying to, I think, cause confusion or maybe just not heard, because sometimes the numbers, I was a history major, but I took a lot of poli-sci classes. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but polling is more accurate if done right than people give it credit for. And people have this idea that you should poll lots of people and the more people you poll and all that, it's like, that's not how polling works at all. In fact, if you poll too many people and you get into too many subgroups, whatever, you dilute the polling and you have and your data becomes worse. Like, it's a scientific method of why you want like 800 people or 1,300 or things like that. And you have these certain margins of error, but the information has to be accurate. And they just didn't know how to, or most pollsters didn't know how to tap into it. So there's a method to the madness, but they just need to figure out how to incorporate that vote. And it's too late now. He's not going to run again. So it might just revert back to the mean and be more accurate in the future. But I was just confused by that. And I'm not even talking about when Jaffe and I talked about it, where he was really confident. We had no information at that point. So I actually understand the level of confidence then. When you look at how unpopular Trump is, how vulnerable he seems, and how he seemed to have a ceiling. But that's the major thing, or there's many major things I take from this. Everyone was like, Trump's ceiling's 47%. And his only way to win is to throw a bunch of confusion with third parties like RFK at the time and all the others.
Right.
And what we realized from this is that actually, not only is he going to win the popular vote, he's going to win a plurality of the vote. Those are two different things. And it means that he got more than 50% of the vote. You know, because you can win the popular vote by not winning the over 50%. That happens constantly. So that's a big deal. And I think the biggest takeaway, and I said I had a bunch of them, a litany of them, but the biggest is it's a repudiation of the power structures from what Curtis Yarvin, who I'm an academic that I really, do you know Curtis Yarvin, Jaffe? Do you know that name? I've talked about him in the past. No. He's an interesting guy. I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but he's just interesting. He's the guy that thinks that the United States should be run by a monarchy. Have you heard about that theory? Like that it should be like there should be like what I think he calls an accountable CEO that that makes all the decisions. And he's a really interesting guy, but he has this theory of this thing called the cathedral. And it's basically the nexus of academia and media. And this is the thing that I think he gets right. Is that what we saw, and this is what he definitely gets right. What we saw in this election is how in the tank and biased even the most mainstream and trusted media was. And how wrong it was, and how with all of those pieces of power and those fronts, the nightly news, cable news, the Washington Post and the New York Times, like all of these different things, big podcasts, whatever the case might be, an entire celebrity apparatus, the biggest musicians in the world, the biggest influencers in the world, all were like, vote for Kamala Harris. And everyone's like, nope. And that to me is devastating. It goes so far and above and beyond.
But what does he say about that though? That's what happened, but what are you saying his philosophy feeds into that? How?
Well, I think it's what I was talking about. You're talking about Trump specifically, right?
No. This guy, this guy.
I'm sorry, Curtis Yarvin. Yeah, so what he's saying is there's a cabal that self-fulfills media through academia, creating basically common what would be like the common consensus views on things that aren't. You know, so whether it's like trans people in sports, profoundly unpopular. But if you read the New York Times or watched cable news or the nightly news with Lester Holt or whatever, you wouldn't know that. You know, legal immigration, disastrous to the point that 67% of Americans want mass deportation. And we talked about this on our last podcast, is like, that's not even where I stand.
That's scary.
You know, that's more than 2/3 of people want everyone removed. Okay, you know, but you would never, well, wait a minute, but you would never, ever know that because there are pieces coming from Ivy League schools and academics appearing on MSNBC and op-ed writers at the New York Times, and they're all the same. And they set the message. And this was, I think, an important inflection point in saying like, absolutely not. And it happened with a very unpopular presidential candidate running on the GOP side and an even worse candidate running for the Democrats, which I think people saw through, which is why it goes back earlier to saying like, I really do think some of the other people would have won, even with 100 days to go, if they were just chosen.
I agree with you. Who do you think?
I think Josh Shapiro is a reasonable person. I think Gretchen Whitmer would have been an interesting litmus test to see if it was about women. Gavin Newsom's, I think, risky to run. I think that's too easy to attack.
I like him, but I agree.
But I think there are multiple people. And it goes even to picking the VP candidate as well. I was saying earlier that Biden picked, as all VP candidates do, someone that's not going to outshine them, that's like less remarkable than them. And when you're as little as when you have as little remarkability as Harris does, you have to really dig deep. And Walz was a horrible VP pick, made no sense.
So bad.
And it makes me feel like Shapiro said no, very similar to how Romney said no to McCain in 2008. And ultimately you end up with a fucking Palin because no one wants to be on the losing ship. And I think people did that because as I said earlier, just engineering it from a 4D chess perspective, the strong Democratic candidates don't want Harris to win. In fact, they want her to burn out. And they also know, because of the rules of identity politics and the way the Democrats are constructed around that they can't possibly attack her because of who she is. If she was a white man or even a white woman, but as unpopular as she was as VP, they would have removed her immediately and put someone else in. So they got, what is the hoisted by their own petard?
Yes.
But even with the finances, you think,
and that's the other thing, dude, the money. The thing that is where I just like glaze over and I just look at someone like dead eyed, like, are you seriously saying this to me? Is like the billionaire supporting Trump and Elon Musk. And I'm like, are we really going to go down this road? You control every media apparatus as a party, clearly, all of the tech companies give to you, the people that work there, 95, 97, 99% Democrat. Every academic institution is Democrat run completely. All the celebrities in Hollywood are Democrat, and you spent 3 times more money than Trump. Funded,
no, I mean the money for fundraising that they had already raised. You don't think that would have been a reason not to run someone else that wasn't her?
I think
is what you're saying.
Josh Shapiro at $700 million wins the race.
Okay.
And or at least makes it way more competitive. Certainly Pennsylvania is not going to be in play, right? I mean, that removes one of the massive routes that were needed to win. It all went through Pennsylvania, right? It didn't make any sense. But like, as I understand it, Harris spent more money given to her from billionaires and millionaires than Trump raised, period. So the entire idea that it's like, it's all so manipulative, I guess is what I'm saying. It doesn't reflect reality. The Trump operation, in some sense, and I appreciate this from a poli-sci perspective, is an underdog operation. The dude is being sued by everyone. He gets no positive press coverage, no benefit of the doubt. Everything he says is misinterpreted. Everything he says is twisted in ways that were never.
That's not entirely fair. I mean,
like,
he does look at Fox, look at Newsmax, look at Joe Rogan. I'm not saying
Rogan Rogan became important. Newsmax irrelevant. Fox News, is important, but we're talking about cable news is its own thing in some sense. The thing is that we all know what I'm talking about. Like, anyone who knows reality knows what I'm saying is true.
Well, I know reality, and I know some of what you're saying is logical, and some of it's true. But I'm not suggesting what the Democrats have in their camp is not massively overpowered compared to just even Fox News, right? I get what you're saying, and I think there's a lot of accuracy there. The one thing, though, that I will push back on with this, what's his name, Curtis Yarvin?
Yeah.
Is I think it's wrong. I haven't read his stuff, but how I'm understanding it from you, it seems incorrect to say that the Democrats and the progressives of the left, whatever, control the media and in academia, and it ends up creating this lie that gets sold, as if that's not happening meaningfully on the other side as well. When you talk about trans men or trans women in sports is hugely unpopular. Or if you talk about mass immigration, hugely unpopular or hugely popular or whatever. What's popular about it is because there's also a lie there that is being sold. If you actually walk someone through the financial hit this country will take if Trump is able to do the mass deportations that he's talking about, in terms of the cost of goods going up or families being broken up that are, splitting families up.
It's horrifying.
Most people would say, okay, well, I don't like that. Right. But that's not the message they get either. So I think this Yarvin guy may be correct that the message ends up becoming the truth, whether the message is right or not, correct or not, but to act as if that is somehow a phenomenon that we mostly or only see on the left, I think is not correct.
Well, no, I disagree with you here. I mean, I got to push back on this in some sense. Like, you've seen alternative routes pop up for right-wing content because there is no place for them in mainstream content. Like, there is no replacement.
I'm talking about the message. Wherever it pops up, ultimately there's a message that gets sold to their base that isn't categorically true on the left and the right. Yarvin's just talking about it sounds like on the left, but women in sports and trans folks in women's sports being incredibly unpopular is such a rare instance It is such a minor blip on what's happening in our culture that we should care about, but it has become disproportionately meaningful because of messages that get sent that aren't really all that accurate.
I disagree with that too. I disagree with that too. But
how so?
Because it's emblematic of the nonsense, I think, that encapsulates this time and place.
Give me an example of the nonsense that is emblematic of.
But the nonsense is what we're talking about. Just as an example, is like people that are born men have period an advantage over women athletes. They compete in certain places. Have you been keeping an eye on college volleyball by chance? Women's volleyball this season? When there's
has anyone? But anyway, continue.
It's coming up. It's very similar to what happened with swimming and all these kind of niche things where there's in women's volleyball, I think in the Mountain West division, there's a team in San Jose State University that has a male player, and teams are starting to just forfeit the games when they play them.
Right. I'm not. Yeah.
So it's people conflate this idea that it's why everyone's trans. And it's like, that's not what everyone's saying. What everyone's saying, I think, is like, why aren't you paying attention to what is obviously true? Even if it's a minor thing, it's obviously true. And we have to pretend that it isn't. And the reason that we know that this, especially after the election, that this carried through is I don't know if you guys have read about which ads they felt were the campaigns and the data says were more effective or whatever.
No,
I don't know if you saw these, especially in California, but there was an ad I saw a bunch of times. You probably saw it too. Dag was Kamala Harris is for they, them. Donald Trump is for you.
Yep.
That was widely renowned as being such an effective ad that Bill Clinton himself apparently got in touch with the Biden or the Harris people were like, you need a retort to this ad. This ad is devastating. And they basically ignored him.
No.
And
okay. But so what you're saying then,
like,
but let's be really clear because I think it's important. What you're saying is the trans folks in women's sport is not so much the we're concerned about college volleyball. It's a reflection of what they have been told this issue means at a meta level, which is you are being asked to do things that you don't agree with that you think are nonsensical.
Right. And that it's kind of the tyranny of the majority in some sense where it's like you're being told by people that just because it doesn't happen very much means that it doesn't matter. Like just because there's only a few women that have been hurt in athletics, or that there's only a few hundred women that have lost their scholarships or whatever. It's not that big of a deal, but it's emblematic of the emperor having no clothes. The narrative of it not mattering is false. The narrative of it not mattering in terms of the athletics is false. And I think most people would say the narrative of there being a difference between a man and a woman is actually real. And you're seeing this when especially all of the
the real problem is it's maybe a different topic, but it is such a wedge issue, and it is based on such disinformation. The idea that there are not the idea that there are actually people out there that are trans folks, and that they deserve dignity and they deserve the same rights as everyone else, is not worth questioning. And I know you guys don't question that. I wouldn't be here if you question that. But I think maybe the message that needs to be talked about is, why can't we find a way to make situations like that, or abortion or racism or whatever, why both sides black and white it to such an extent that I think it creates this really harmful division? Because I don't think my son who's trans is not walking around going, I was not born with the physical attributes of a woman. He knows that. We all know that. He knows there's gender dysphoria. He also knows that current science is suggesting that there's lots of other markers for this that have been there since we've, transitioned out of cave people, Cro-Magnon people, that suggest that it's not as simple as a lot of people want to make it. But the other side uses it as a wedge issue and says it's simple. And that's a really harmful thing. Just like just like eugenics. Oh, the black people have this part. Remember in what was the movie with Tarantino did with the Candyland? What was that fucking thing?
In the
Django.
South. Django Unchained.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's like, well, look at the black person's skull. It's got this indentation. That means they can never be as smart, and it's like, okay, what are we talking about? It's like, that's the level of discourse.
Yeah, it's like Nazi science.
Right. And it's like, stop. Just fucking stop. And maybe if the left stopped and the right, I don't know. It's very personal to me, obviously.
I know it is.
Sure. But it should be, whether it's a black person, a trans person, a woman, anybody who's not the sort of straight white male thing. I think we should just stop acting like they're trying to tell me what to think. Nobody cares. Just stop being an asshole. Is the real trick. But I anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
Well, no, to me, the trans issue is interesting just because I both get annoyed by it, but also understand that like these people are questioning my existence. It's like, I think you have to understand that most people are not questioning your existence. A vast majority are not questioning your existence. What they're asking, or at least I'll speak for myself. Yeah. What I'm asking for is like, we have to live in a shared reality. People go into the world and understand, okay, you want to be called a man, but you were born a woman. We can give you that politeness, even if we don't agree with that. Not a big deal. It's kind of like the moray of the time, right?
But what's not to agree with? I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, but with trans people, it's like, not only do you have to pretend, right? And even if you are a bigot, and we want you to still pretend in public, and that's cool. I think people should be treated in public, in a reasonable way. We have to actually bend reality. We have to participate in sports. We have to be in the bathroom with you, even if it makes you uncomfortable. We have to be in the changing room. Women have dicks. Men can get pregnant. Like all of this kind of stuff. And to me, I'm like, no, that's not living in a shared reality. That's living in your reality and foisting it on everyone else. And a lot of people are simply saying no. Like, and that's why it's important with what's going on with the mountain division in the volleyball, and why I brought that up and why that's a story right now is because the women are literally saying like, we will lose automatically instead of playing you at this point. Like, what don't you fucking get?
But okay, so here's my problem, and this goes back to your guy. I know he's not your guy, but the guy you brought up, the Yarvin guy, which is then say what you just said. Say, here's the reason a lot of people are struggling with this, because you're asking them to, and you're presenting it in a way, like, I don't think any trans person I know is asking someone to bend reality. They frankly don't care. Most of them that I've talked to, they're just like, look, leave me the fuck alone and stop being a dick to me and let me have the same chance as everybody else. That's most trans people I know. And I know more than most.
Yeah. And I would say that's most of everyone. Right.
But the messaging is not that. The messaging is not what you just presented, which is, here's what a lot of people struggle with. They are under the impression, and I'm sure it's true by some, but not most, that trans folks are demanding they bend this reality. My son knows he was born and identified as a woman as a child. He knows he popped out of his mother's vagina and they said that's a girl. He knows that. He struggled with it because that's not how he felt. And neither you, I, or the vast majority of your listeners have any understanding of what's happening in the brain or the chemistry of a trans person. All we know is we can either go, I respect that, or I don't. And what you're saying and the way you just explained it is the way it should be explained. So people on both sides would go, okay, I get that. I don't agree with all of it, but I get your position.
Yeah.
But when it is presented as bad and good, or these people are going to groom your kids and molest your kids, and then I don't see how you could expect anything but the other side to push back and go, fuck you.
Yeah, I get that. I think it's too far. Like, I think it's in this case, it's too far. I just bring up all of these things about shared reality and respect shown in public spaces and all that kind of stuff, to the point where if I were on the San Jose State University team, or if I was that trans person on that team, I would look around at the situation and be like, I shouldn't be doing this. Yeah, I mean, like it's not worth it. Like, I'm blowing this whole thing up. And I know damn well that I do have an advantage over these people, that I'm spiking the ball harder, that I'm taller, and all of these kinds of things. It's like what happened with that boxer in the Olympics, that it came out in the last few days that she has XY chromosomes, dude. And you could just tell by the way she was savaging them that she had an advantage, and we all had to be like, no, that's totally normal. That's good shit,
I don't think
man.
anybody, I think honestly, the reason it doesn't go down with anybody half intelligent with the sports stuff is because it's that problem is so easily solvable. No one who cares about sports wants uneven matches, right? But it's got nothing to do with anything that can't be signed. You weigh in boxers, you check bone density with boxers to determine what weight class they're in.
Right.
Now that we live in, don't we want better matching anyway, whether or not it has anything to do with trans, not trans, or cis or not cis? Don't we want to say, hey, that individual is going to make a better battle betwixt that individual because these 20 markers that we can now check. The fact that you're even bringing up XY chromosomes as something to check means we can do it. Why isn't that, if we care about fair play, that should be the barometer, not anything else?
Yeah, I think I think we all agree on that. I think it's just, this is what I'm talking about living your own life and doing your own thing, but interacting with a shared reality with others in a way that's fair and equitable. And I think people think that the trans movement has been incredibly aggressive in certain ways, in ways that do not sync with reality and are never going to sync with shared reality. So we need to, and this is just one of those fronts. It's not, like you said, it's not the end of the world. It's an emblem, and people have glommed onto it because it's not fair. And it seems, I mean, honestly, it's like profoundly misogynistic. That's at the end of the day, it's like, it's strange that is so obviously misogynistic. And you have conservatives kind of coming out, more traditionalist type people because it's so obvious.
Do you think there is a way, and maybe that I'll save this question, but ponder it because I have to run real quick, but I'll be right back. Mm-hmm. But whenever we talk about these things, there is a sense of an ability to have a conversation about it. That doesn't play for politics. It just doesn't, right? For the reasons we were talking about earlier, because people don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the time. It's easier to manipulate on both sides with a simple message, with an emotional message versus an intellectual message. This isn't sustainable, I assume. We're going to kill each other if we continue to feel this way about the other side all the time.
Yeah, I think that and we can get back to it, I think, in a deeper way when you come back, but I think it's up to it seems to me that it's kind of up to the Democrats now to cast out their loud, and this is what you're seeing from centrist Democrats that barely won their House seats, and all of the rest are already saying it, is like, I think it was Tom Suozzi actually in New York that literally said, like, I'm afraid to say right now that I'm against trans people in sports, he's like, I shouldn't be afraid of saying that. It doesn't even make any sense. Why are we so beholden to this small group of people, similar to the campus protests, which don't reflect at all American opinion on what's going on in Israel and Gaza, And I'm not saying either way. I don't think it's something we should be involved in at all. So I'm not taking, but
you agree that both sides push these simplified messages in order to get votes. And in that, it does very big harm to the actual experience of living in this country.
Right. But I also think that now that we know that it's a pluralistic movement, at least mildly, that
based
Democrats,
on what though? Social issues or financial issues?
No, I'm saying like the MAGA kind of movement, if you look at it, or like the Trumpism is a mildly pluralistic thing now because he won the popular vote.
Yeah, but did he win the popular vote because of social issues or because of the economy? If you look at abortion, for example, I think it's
everything. I think that the abortion issue is interesting because I actually think getting it off of the plate by having the states pass their own laws is great because it's just going to remove any need to talk about it in the future. So I think it kind of works out for everyone. Even the red states are approving it. Like you said, Florida had the 60% barrier, but Missouri passed it, even though it is ruby red and all of the rest. So I think it's moving in the right direction. What I'm saying is that because it's a pluralistic movement for the first time, at least through the vote, Democrats find themselves in a reactionary posture now.
Yeah.
And it's up to them how they respond. And I think there's a really good way to respond amicably that peels a bunch of people back off. But you have to focus on the working class again.
Yeah. I agree with that. I don't agree that the pluralistic movement is a reflection of a pluralistic support of the social agenda of MAGA. I think a lot of people voted for Trump because of the money, and I get that. But I think if you're suggesting that most people want the kind of social America that DeSantis wants, where we're taking books out of libraries and we're banning abortion, I don't think that's accurate.
No, I don't think that's accurate either, but I don't think that that's what I would say. I interpret the MAGA platform as really not even being a social platform. It's a social platform.
So when I come back, I'm very curious then what you mean by that, because I that's how I interpret it, and maybe that's wrong.
Okay, we're back. Jaffe, how did your session go?
It went well. I had to make I made up some shit about what's on my face because I'm like, I don't want to get into it, lady.
What did you say?
What did you say?
I said I'm doing a green screen color test. She doesn't know.
Oh my God, you fucking! She doesn't believe that for 1 second.
Yeah, she probably didn't. She's a therapist. She knows. But it was good. It was good. I'm a big fan of therapy, but it really, she's more of a psychiatrist. She wanted to just kind of make sure she's not going to get sued for prescribing me more ADD meds. Pretty much is what those appointments are.
Dude, I was seeing someone telehealth when I moved here for psychiatry, and I felt like it was such a joke that I was like, I can't see you anymore.
Because you were in a different state, or what do you mean?
No, because I was here, but doing it over like you could just say anything. Like it just felt like I could say anything. And like I was telling them what I already took, and they're like, okay, all right, great, and all this kind of stuff.
As in, like it wasn't like they were looking out for your medical health. It was just more like I have to check the boxes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like it got worse and worse, where it's like, what are we even doing here? Like you don't know me for shit. So I started. I totally have sworn off telehealth personally. Yeah. Just for meds. I think it's good for like talking, like psychology.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's fine. But I feel like you have to. I feel like you and me need to see each other, and like we're talking about drugs, and like real things. So I'm like, we got to. So I started seeing someone like actually in my area.
Yeah. Okay. She's literally 2 blocks away. I just don't like to go outside, but I will go see her once a year so she can take my blood pressure and make sure that everything's okay. But yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want to like see somebody in Vermont for something I've never met before. And they're like, hey baby, what do you want? You want some DMT? Not a problem, pal. Mix this with, I'm with you.
I get it.
The medical marijuana stuff's a joke. Like,
what is that? What do you mean?
The interviews you have for that.
Get a card.
Yeah, it's like, why are we even doing this?
It's a formality.
And I really do feel like I need it for like medical reasons in terms of managing my anxiety and sleep. But it's like, you don't even care. I'm like, I've always been over prepared.
Right.
For those meetings, and you never need to say anything.
No.
Some of them end in 30 seconds.
The whole making it illegal is stupid anyway.
I agree.
But,
true.
And that was voted down in Florida as well. Yeah. But by the way, Jeff, you sound a little low.
Is that better? I can turn up the gain. Let me see.
Yeah, turn up the game a little bit. But we were talking before you went to your sesh.
Test. How's that?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Before you went to your session, we were talking about, I guess, the MAGA movement, and we were talking about if it was a social movement or something else. And I think it's literally a social movement because it's a social organization, but it's not predicated on social issues at all. It's predicated on policy and nationalism, I would say. I don't personally consider myself, I think I don't want to be in anything that's too cultish. And unless it's like Cobra or something, I would want to be in Cobra.
Oh, that's different. That's different.
But it's why even though I'm ostensibly a Republican, I left the party and will never go back, because it's like, I don't really need to be a part of this. Like, I don't care. You have to earn my vote. And Trump didn't earn my vote in 2016 at all. I thought he was a horrible candidate, frankly, and couldn't believe that he won. And in 2020, I was just like, I was like, I cannot even believe we're doing this, with these two fucking Muppets. But I came to appreciate him more in this third time around, because as I said earlier, I think he became overtly victimized by the system to a degree where you kind of realized he was the underdog and that he would be the bull in the china shop the second time around. And the thing that makes some people nervous about him is what makes me excited about actually the potential of what he can do in office the second time around is that he knows what to do now, and the bureaucrats and all of the things that got in his way, I don't think are going to be an issue anymore. Now, a lot of people are scared about those kinds of things, but to me, I'm like, no, like, let's see what the vision is without deep state bureaucrats getting involved and the intelligence apparatus and all of this kind of stuff to try to take him down, because there's no doubt that like the Russian interference stuff is way overblown and entirely from the intelligence apparatus of the United States and the UK, the Steele dossier and all of those kinds of things. All of those people signed, our great intelligence apparatus signed this thing saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation nonsense. And I guarantee most of them knew that at the time too. Because they're not dumb. Jim Clapper's a fucking moron. Really? The heads of the CIA and the FBI are idiots. They don't know. It's hard to believe. So the more that this built, the more I was like, oh, like they really are trying to destroy this dude. Like there's no doubt about that. Like however they can get him. And remember last time we talked about it was like Al Capone-esque, where it's like you get the dude, how it's what Nintendo's doing to Pal World. Right. It's like, we're going to get you motherfuckers. We're not going to get you for what you're guilty for and what we all know you're guilty for. We're going to get you for something else.
Okay, so let's. I don't know if I agree with you, but let's assume you're right. Why do they? There have been plenty of people that have opposed the Democratic Party and have lost and won. What is it about, in your opinion, this guy that creates such a need to go above and beyond the normal tactics to get him?
Don't you see it's like what there's a threat component that I think has been overstated about him that has self-fulfilled itself over time. You even saw this with the secretaries of state in Maine and Colorado trying to remove him from the ballot. Like by the time you got to this point, it's like, dude, you're just begging me to vote for this guy at this point. Like you're begging me to do it. Like you won't just let things play out. Like you have to put your thumb on the scale and make it so much worse and so much more dramatic than a lot of these things are. And it washes out a lot of the things that I think were more realistic to go and get him for. And if they focused, they might have been able to get him for the things. I think the Georgia phone call was strange. The documents thing is irrelevant to me because they're not going to go after Biden for that either. And everyone seems to do this. So it's like, that would be kind of nonsensical. Obviously, Letitia James is completely politically motivated. And that thing in New York was insane to the point where the victims in the case, the banks, were all like, we don't want you to do this. And in fact, we'd like to be in business with them again. We all got paid back. We don't understand the crime. Like that's how kangaroo courtish that was. So like that specific thing was insanity, And to me, I was like, this is fucked. To the point where, remember the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, said, when people were like, dude, this is like what you guys have said here is a pretty dangerous precedent about how you're going to treat real estate investors and all this kind of stuff. And she's like, oh, no, you don't have to worry about that. And it's like, dude, this kind of stuff is transparent. It doesn't matter like what he's done wrong at some point to many people when you can just look at it and be like, yeah, this is kind of a witch hunt in some way. You can't just let him wash out or focus.
What do you think because there are things, my biggest issues with him are the Georgia phone call and the whole January 6th thing. But regardless of that, when you say it's a witch hunt, or at least in parts of what they went after him for, what I'm asking is, why did they go after this guy in this way compared to, they didn't go after Romney this way. They didn't go after McCain this way. What is it about him that you feel motivates that behavior that you're suggesting?
It's interesting. In some ways, I think they did go after McCain and Romney in some of the same way, not legally, but certainly socially. McCain was also a Nazi and a fascist. Romney was also a Nazi and a fascist. So these people are all positioned in similar defamatory ways to begin with. But I think with Trump, there was the impetus of something real there. Like there's no denying that, right? Like there's no denying, from my perspective anyway. I think some people maybe would deny it, but like that there's like some unsavory shit going on. He says things he shouldn't say.
Of course.
He's out of pocket, you know. But I want it's kind of strange. It reminds me a lot of the John Adams story, and this is actually in the HBO show. They show this when he represents the British soldiers during that the Boston Massacre 1770. And do you know the story, Jaffe?
I don't know the story, and I haven't seen the show, but I hear it's great.
Well, it's great.
It's basically a really important, subtle moment in American history. The Boston Massacre is this thing where, you know, the Sons of Liberty are kind of mowed down by British redcoats in Boston during the late occupation era before the war begins. And Boston is heavily patriot, so they were going to basically string these dudes up. And there was really no prayer for them to get a fair trial. John Adams was a notable patriot at this point, kind of more reluctant, but certainly involved. Obviously, his cousin Samuel is a major proponent of the Sons of Liberty in Boston, and he offers to represent the soldiers during the British soldiers. And everyone's like, you're a maniac. Like you might get killed. Your family might get killed, and you are going to not have a practice after this because no one's going to trust you. And he was like, no, quite the opposite. Like, I'm going to give these guys the most robust defense they can possibly get so that we can prove that the system works. And what ended up happening is that the dudes weren't really as guilty as you'd think. They were being goaded and shit was being thrown at them, snowballs with rocks in them, and they were being pelted by things. And one of them shot, and I think 5 people died during the Boston Massacre, and he got the soldiers off. And it was a really notable moment. It's like you could have had these guys, like you definitely could have made an example of them, and you probably would have locally gotten away with it, but you didn't do it because it wasn't on the up and up. And I think it's kind of similar in some sense, in a spirit, to what this is all about, where it's like, if you just focused on what was real, you might have gotten them, but you got so caught up in this, we must get him. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. He can't win. We have to do whatever it takes. That you'll do whatever it takes. You'll, for instance, trot out neoconservative Liz Cheney as your major surrogate, right? So it's strange that. But
for you, so let's assume, and I have no reason to believe that there weren't some of these cases that we'll try anything to see what sticks.
Yeah.
So let's assume that's an accurate statement. Is there a place in your mind to be able to say what they did there was wrong, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that are disqualifying for him as a future president based on what he has done that they are also accusing him of? I mean, does the slate get wiped clean just because some of the tactics to go after him were negative?
I think it's an interesting question, because the disqualifying thing, it's like there is a way to be constitutionally disqualified, but otherwise disqualification is this nebulous philosophical thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. That's why I said in your mind.
Right. And so what I'm getting to, I guess, basically is the answer is no. People didn't see this on balance as disqualifying at all. And I really think that January 6th was a pretty dark thing. I was actually joking around with this with Micah, where I was like, do you remember, you guys wouldn't remember this, but I was asking her this. I'm like, do you remember January? Like, we were just totally aloof on January 6th. Like, I was like playing games. I'd have to look at what trophies I was earning that day or whatever. Like, we were just in our, and wasn't even paying attention at all. And then like that night and the next day I started to catch up with, I was like, wait, what happened? Like, wasn't even really paying attention to anything. I had kind of tapped out after the election, actually. And it wasn't a surprise the way the last election came out either, in my opinion. But so I guess what I'm saying is I just think because it's this philosophical academic thing, it's about consensus when you're talking about the executive, or like the board of directors, basically. And I think that it's been looked on balance as not disqualifying. And I clearly didn't feel like it was necessarily disqualifying because I voted for him. But again, I was more voting against Harris, just as in principle. And that wasn't the first time I voted against someone.
Yeah.
You know, I voted against McCain when I voted for Obama.
Yeah.
I didn't really vote for, I did vote for Obama, but I was really more voting against McCain.
let me ask this to you guys, because the thing that I obviously more of my media diet, I try to be balanced. And again, I've talked about ground news before, which I love and all that stuff. But certainly a lot of my media diet is going the next 4 years and maybe beyond because of this. There's a real good chance that we're not going to get back to America as a democracy in terms of, like, let's just take the fact that he had, like, to say that his entire previous cabinet has said, you cannot reelect this guy. A number of his generals have said, these are the things that he said. Forget the inflammatory suckers and losers, but the idea of, can we send the military to the front of the White House where they're protesting and literally shoot some of these people, in the legs and stuff to make it clear you can't be protesting. To me, now without the guardrails, like you're saying, I don't know. I don't know what to feel. Do I just go, well, it's going to be 4 years with a really, Republican, not even Republican, but sort of a guy who I think is really problematic, but fuck it. Maybe in 4 years, the Democrats will come out of the wilderness. We'll get a bright and shiny new candidate, blah, blah, blah. Or are we pretty much marching towards the end of this experiment because he's going to have the House, he's got the Senate, he's got the judicial branch, which is insane to me what's happening at the Supreme Court. And obviously he has the presidency.
Oh my God, it's going to be conservative forever now, by the way, the Supreme Court.
You think so?
But this idea and all the way to something like Project 2025, I mean, how realistic do you think those things are given what did happen on January 6th? Whether you want to call it a riot and insurrection, he sat there for hours, that's on record, and did nothing. He continued, I don't need to relitigate it, but just the most extreme was he sat there and did nothing. And then with the Mike Pence thing, after he knew what was happening, he was still tweeting out motivating tweets to his followers when he knew Mike Pence was in danger at the Capitol.
That's insane.
I mean, are those all just lies of the left and you just don't believe them? Or do you think there's a real danger in what they say, that this guy, without the guardrails and with people in his ear that wrote Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation and whatnot, that there's a real danger here?
I personally don't think there's any systemic danger. I think there's even less systemic danger this time because it is literally unconstitutional for him to even run again. So like it's over after this. His lame in some ways, what I don't think people are focusing on is that he goes into an office in a very unique lame duck posture, which doesn't typically happen. I mean, Grover Cleveland is the only other person, and that was before, you could term out. So he could have technically run again. Grover Cleveland's last term was really bad though. So
he has nothing to lose now.
Right. Exactly. That's the thing that I think people are losing sight of. Is not that he's going to stay in power or whatever, but that he really has no reason to conserve political capital at all. There's nothing for him to gain. And so that's why I think it's going to be a much more of like when they say they're going to deport people, like I believe it, when they say they're going to mess around with tariffs in some sense, I believe it, though I think that it's a cudgel. Hogan and I talked about this. Like, I really believe that it's just a weapon. It's not. First of all, we have tariffs right now. First of all, right. Second of all, we should have tariffs in certain ways. And third of all, you just have to use them as a negotiating tool. Everyone wants to sell in our market. So like we should, but we don't want to get into trade wars and all of that. But I think things are going to go a lot further this time in trying to get the platform that he ran on done, because I think that he will have more acolytes around him and all of this. But there is this argument, and I think this is a reasonable argument. I want to say it was actually J.D. Vance made this argument on Rogan, but I think it was Ramaswamy that made it at some point too, is like the balance in power and the interplay between judiciary, the legislature, and the executive is not supposed to be necessarily within the bounds of those. So the executive is the executive branch. It's one person, and it's supposed to be working towards one direction, so that if people in what is called the deep state or the bureaucrats are pulling against you, that's actually not really the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to have an entire apparatus that works for you. That's the entire idea. And I don't think, because he didn't think he was going to win last time and didn't really even have much of a transition team put together, I think you end up with stooge-like neocons and weird, system people and all of that, like Rex Tillerman or whatever the fuck that guy's name was, the ExxonMobil CEO. Mm-hmm. How does that guy become Secretary of State? It's because you're unprepared and the powers that be are trying to take advantage of the situation and wield themselves upon you. And I don't think that that's going to happen this time. So at the very least, you'll have a more pure version of what the platform might be. And I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily, because it's what people voted for, and it's how they feel. But I don't believe that, first of all, I think that most of what people say about Trump is a lie, or at least predicated in a lie. I don't think
what do you think the top 3 lies are that you hear that that obviously are lies? So
it was like, and you've talked about this in the past, but it was like the good people on both sides sort of thing. Like,
that was a lie. That's right.
But we won't even get into the vernacular. It's like the Russiagate thing is like one of the great hoaxes perpetrated on the United States by the security apparatus that I've ever seen. And it's nonsense. It's fucking nonsense. Like, it's all nonsense, and the entire idea that Russia interferes with our elections and stuff. Of course they do.
Sure. I mean, we interfere
with each other's elections, It's not to say it's right or wrong. It's just like, what are we doing here? Like, what do you live in a fucking, in like utopia?
Yeah.
These guys are like messing with us on a constant, needling us all the time. It has nothing to do with Trump, So there's that. I also think the big thing, the big lie to me too, is like the 34 counts felon or whatever. Like, what a bunch of horse shit. That entire case was horse shit. There are no victims. The victims that reported to be don't feel victimized. This is a total state power play. So I think that that's another major lie. And then, I don't know. I mean, maybe some of the stuff that people like, a major recent lie was the when he was talking about Liz Cheney and like giving Liz Cheney a gun and sending her to fight. Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, he wants her to be in front of a firing squad. It's like, what are you talking about? No. Like, all you have to do is listen to what he said. That's not true. You're lying, and you're lying.
Well,
just like they knew they were lying about the both sides thing, just like they knew even this thing about, I thought the whole Puerto Rico thing was so cringy, the reaction to it. Like, oh my God, an insult comic said something about a place, and it's like, was it politically smart? No. But like, can we stop clutching our pearls? Have you ever heard this dude on his fucking show? No. Have you ever heard him on the roast of Tom Brady?
Yes.
Or any of those kinds of things? Like, he's a roast comic. Like, so let's like not feign, Meanwhile, on the other side, Biden calls all Trump supporters trash or garbage or whatever he calls them. And then they spin it. They rewrite the transcript.
Right.
The media takes that and runs with it like a ball down the middle of the field. It's just this constant chip damage that I think has been done has undermined anything real about him. And it is the greatest political comeback story in American history. Like, it used to be like maybe Andrew Jackson was kind of a great comeback story. Certainly Nixon was a great comeback story, but this is, the greatest of them all, whether you agree with it or not, just from a fucking historical standpoint. It's amazing.
Yeah, I understand.
And I was reading it. I think it was in the Post. It's like he vanquished like the Bushes, the Obamas, the Bidens, the Clintons. Like,
well, he didn't vanquish the Obamas.
Barack Obama, dude. People, I don't know what you've been reading. People want to Barack Obama burn all of his capital. Like, he is never going to be taken that seriously.
Oh, you mean
again.
Regarding this particular election? Like
he put them all away.
Status,
he would.
I see. I thought you meant
Cheneys. Like, and listen, dude. The one thing I'll say about this is the platform is shaping up pretty nice, regardless of how you feel about the person. When I look at the platform, like the Republican platform right now, or at least like what they're talking about doing, it's like, I don't really disagree with any of it.
Okay, give me some things that you like.
Unwinding us from the Ukraine war, which has nothing to do with us and which Ukraine was always going to lose anyway. being more temperate towards the Israeli situation while having sympathy for them, understanding that we need to get them to the table. And by the way, Hamas immediately said that they were looking to get to the peace table when Trump won, which is an interesting sign. So there's that. And then so that's foreign policy, which is
let's just take those two though. Where are you getting? Because I haven't now. Maybe again, I'm probably just haven't heard, but I got the sense that Trump and Netanyahu were kind of in lockstep together. That they're like, yeah, let's get out of Gaza when the job is done, which means when maybe Israel goes in and makes settlements there, and the Palestinians are like, sorry, pal, you lost. I mean, that's what it sounds like from what I understand Trump and Netanyahu are doing.
Well, I would interpret it as showing deference to whatever the Israelis want to do, which is all we can do, as opposed to involving ourselves. Like think about that shitty dock they built along Gaza. One of our soldiers died on that, like those are the things that I am positive, or not positive, but confident it's not going to happen. Like the risk of boots on the ground in that area, the risk of us escalating it has gone down precipitously without.
Okay. So you're measuring success based on simply we get out of it. You're not worried about the fact that it creates more of a hornet's nest over there, where now that Israel comes back into Gaza and resettles it, that's going to make the goodwill over there for the Israelis. And you're going to have another multi-generational hornet's nest of hating the Israelis and hating the one part of democracy over there. That's not that that's okay for you, but it's more okay than having American troops over there.
Yeah. I just don't think it really has anything to do with us. I think we can sell weapons to Israel. I think that we can give them, intel and stuff like that if we want to. I think there's clearly, I think there's a lot of line blurring between what's going on there and people kind of talking about it. I'm not one of these people that thinks the Israelis are the bad guys by any stretch of the imagination.
I don't think any of them are the bad guys, and they're all the bad guys.
I think that
Hamas is. I don't think the Palestinians are innocent,
and I think that the Israelis are the victims too, and I think that Hamas are the bad guys, and that it's going to take both sides to expel those things, that extremism, but it has nothing to do with us. That's the whole point. Nothing to do with us. Just like, and so I guess what I'm saying is that I'm an isolationist. I've been an isolationist ever since I came out 20 years ago now against the Iraq war. Maybe like 19ish years ago, because it was after the second Bush election. And so I think that that's good. Like, I think it's good for us to not be involved.
I mean, how can you be an isolationist though now when everything is so connected? Like, let's take Ukraine. My understanding is the way Trump is proposing to solve Ukraine is to basically, let's just call a truce, and Russia, you go ahead and you can have this part that you've already invaded or whatever. And my concern is, but maybe it's not a real concern that is going to matter to most people, is that the message is, hey, you basically went into a country unprovoked, you took over part of it, and the way we're going to end this is you didn't get all of it, but you killed a lot of people and you got some of it. That sounds like that's the Trump plan for ending the war. You're saying as long as we're not over there, whatever message that sends to Putin about what he may do next, that's not our problem.
Yeah. I mean, well, in some sense, yeah. I mean, it's just, it has nothing to do with us. I don't think there is a next step, because I don't think there's anywhere else for him to go. I mean, the only other place for him to go.
Poland would disagree, but.
What'd you say?
Poland would disagree.
He's not going to invade Poland. There's just, that would be suicide. That would be insanity for him to do that. It would be insane. I mean, I don't even know. I was going to say the only other country that I can see him invading would be Moldova. And I think that that's what they were trying to do by going down in, if you know the map of Ukraine, like going down into Crimea and then going across the Black Sea, and basically making a U into Moldova, where they can kind of get things around and then maybe encircle Ukraine in some way from Belarus and kind of drive south. And I just don't think they were able to do that. But I think that was the only other place, because it's the only other country that would be theoretically unprotected from NATO. But I think people confuse. It's like, I don't think the Russians are the good guys, and I don't think what they're doing is right. It's just like, what do you want us to do about it? I think people have to realize that there's like a limit to not only what we're able to do and what we should be doing, but that they're churning through an entire generation or generations of Ukrainians fighting this needless war, where if we just went to the table, the outcome probably would have been exactly the same. And I am a believer, and this is just the reality of the situation. This is to be kind of recriminated later in some sense, but we provoked this war. Like, definitely. If you listen to John Mearsheimer and all those guys, like, we provoked this war. We didn't do what we said we were going to do. We are trying to continue to embarrass this country that we fucking beat already and won't let them off the mat, you know? And I don't know that I would be an imperialist. I'm not a Russian. I don't know what their perspective really is, but it's like, I would be pretty pissed off too. It's like, you guys beat us. Like, can't you just get off of our boundaries? Like, you're encroaching in our space. There's no reason for you to do this to us. You said you weren't going to do it. So that comes with a certain level of responsibility on all sides. And I
don't know enough about that part to have an opinion. So I hear you.
I firmly believe that, like, no one gives a shit about Ukraine. And I'm not saying it from my perspective. I'm saying the people involved in this, they don't give a fuck about it. If they did, if they cared about the people there, they would have been like, you can't win. You cannot win. You don't have enough people. You don't have enough material. The only way you win is if we get literally involved, and it's not going to happen. So you have some decisions to make. And we're sorry, by the way, we put you in this position to begin with. You know,
what do you think about Project 2025? How realistic are those?
I don't really think anything of it. I mean, there's a project I'm pretty sure Heritage Foundation has been doing those projects for decades. And I think the Heritage Foundation will have power and did have power and still would have power over a Trump administration, specifically in the judiciary. Like, if they go and replace a few of the older guys, which they're going to do, I think. And that's why I was saying, like, this thing is going to be fucking wrapped up for a long time.
You saw they're trying to get Sotomayor out before.
Yeah. And dude, if they do that, then it's 7-2 and then it's really over, you know. But even if they can just sustain a 6-3 majority, and I think that like the Project 25 aligned people have influence over that, you know, and the different legal societies that are very obscure, and they put their people forward, and they kind of, you know, a lot of these guys that are on the Supreme Court are identified so long ago, like they're groomed for these positions, you know? And so I don't presume to really understand that space that deeply. But I think
that you're not concerned about anything he may do or his administration may do that you feel will make lives for most Americans really not what we're used to as a democracy. Doesn't bother you.
I just don't know what that would be. Okay. And maybe you can explain it to me. Like, let's take a federal abortion ban. Right? Yeah. Like, they were, and this is what I'm saying is, like, they were maybe you don't take them at their word, but they were explicit. It's like, we're not even interested in pursuing that, you know, and there's not the votes. There's just not the votes to do it. There's never going to happen because there's not the votes. You know, if the Democrats got what they wanted and and they removed the filibuster, which is a major mistake if they ever were to do that, like, they should be glad they never did that, because if they did that with this setup,
well, that's why they didn't do it, right? That's why Biden kept saying, you know, we're not doing that, and we're not going to stack the Supreme Court, because it's always going to end up the same, right? It's always going to be whoever's in power and who's not in power. You know, I agree with that, but look, man, I hope you're right about all this. I really want you to be right, and I want this to just be Reagan. And it's like Reagan did some shit that my far left mind hated and thinks he was terrible for a lot of things. But there was a time in the country where it was bright, and a lot of people, at least for a lot of us, and a lot of people made a lot of money. And, you know, we got rid of Russia as we ended the Cold War. So that would be awesome if we can look back in 4 years and 8 years and whatever and go, a lot of this was fear and scare tactics. And yeah, it was shitty for people like me for 4 years, but you know, that's politics. That's sort of the experiment. I want that to be the case, but it's, you know, just like any side, whatever news you listen to, that's why I try to be balanced. It's real easy to hear people going, well, here's a possible multiverse path that we could be walking, and it sounds scary as fuck.
Well, let me ask you this. What does it say to you? I brought it up before and I closed it. I should have left it open. It was like, basically unilaterally, this is like the most diverse Republican win in history, even going back to Reconstruction, because Reconstruction was mostly white and black. Now it's so much more dynamic than that. You have Hispanics and Asians and Indians. For instance, Trump won 2/3 of Indian voters, right? He won Latino men, 25% of black men. He won the other category. So like if you're like a racial mixture of people or whatever, and you categorize yourself like that, he won those people. He won white women. It's a fairly, what's interesting about that data is it prevails against this idea that it's a racial white supremacist movement or a neo-Nazi movement or an anti-woman movement, because it became more diverse this time around. More women voted, more black people voted, more Hispanic people by far voted. I mean, the Hispanic movement, I mean, dude, when I saw those numbers, I was like, oh my God, this is like a dream for Republicans. Like it's unbelievable that like they actually have them. And the biggest vertical of all, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about young people, especially young men.
Yep. Again, I think
18,
the data
19,
has
20-year-olds voting overwhelmingly.
I think the data has to be exposed to determine how much of the vote was about, and maybe it's already starting to trickle out there, I don't know, how much of it was about we're fucking hungry. You know, we're 20, we're 21 going into the job market and it sucks and things are incredibly expensive. And, you know, how much of it was the economic problems that not only did Biden for a lot of people not solve, but like you said at the beginning, they were trying to tell people you're not really suffering. And clearly for whether they were not, they feel they were enough to vote for the other guy. If that ends up being the big story, then I would say, it's clear why he won, and it has nothing to do with a conservative agenda. Whereas if the story is no, people really like what he was selling beyond the fact that he was going to improve their gas prices and lower the cost of eggs, then I think that's very, very different. But I mean, is that data out there? Do we know why those groups voted the way they did yet? Or is that still...
Yeah, we have exit polling, but I think exit polls are notoriously wrong. And I think it's going to take time to like do post-election, canvassing of opinion about why people really did things.
NBC's first exit poll that came out on the day of the election was it was like 72% were not happy with the direction the country was going.
Yeah, why would you be?
Well, right.
Like, what is there to be happy about? You know,
right. But it's hard to know what that meant. You mean socially? You mean financially? You mean both? You know, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because and it goes back into what I was saying earlier about like none of the data indicated that Harris should really win. And certainly the talent and the ability of the candidate didn't either. But there's nothing to really be happy about. So it was always going to be bad for the incumbent anyway. You would have to have a really talented Obama-like orator or something to really overcome the deficit. It was kind of like how it was clear McCain was going to lose. It's like, how do you after the economy fucking bottoms out and the banks collapse and stuff, it's like, you can't survive. You're not Bush, but you're just aligned with him. You're not going to live. You are the incumbent.
Right.
And so I think that there was some suffering from that too, but you were asking about the platform before. I just think it's isolation. I'm a protectionist. I know it's not very popular, but I am. I don't think we should have free trade with many entities in many countries. I have no problem with that, but it should always be like, our posture should always be like, how are we going to protect our economy? How are we going to protect our people? How are we going to protect our industry, our dollar? And the reality is that we let people flood cheap goods into this country in an insane amount with no penalty towards that, destroying our own ability to manufacture. Now, a dream would be to have like true autarky where like we didn't need anyone and we could just make and do everything here. But that's not the reality. And this is what I was saying to Hogue when we recorded our podcast is like, and we talked about tariffs on consoles and stuff. And we talked about Brazil, which has high tariffs on consoles and hardware and basically all imports. And I was saying, what we have to focus on is not, and this is not, I don't think what Trump's going to do. And I think it's just a leverage tool, but there's no reason to put a tariff on a video game console because we don't make them and we're not going to make them. It's like putting a tariff on a phone.
Mm-hmm.
We don't make them. There's no competition, or a toy, but like you can put tariffs on cars. You can put tariffs on air conditioning units and all these things that are built in Mexico and in China and all of that to protect our own manufacture with the things we do build, which is why I think one of Biden's great moves, honestly, was the CHIPS Act of starting to repatriate silicon manufacture in the United States. Like there's no reason. And then that, not to be an asshole, but it untethers us from the whole Taiwan question. Once this thing is done, it's like, well, okay, like if China goes after Taiwan, that's not going to affect. I mean, we can do something about it. Maybe we do. Who knows? But we're not going to have any economic reason.
That's an interesting domino call. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I agree with Jaffe that the strong red push was a universal sort of vote for economic change. Obviously, that's happening across everybody, despite racial backgrounds, so even socioeconomic, obviously geography, all that kind of thing. I know we got lost in the weeds on a couple of things. I just wanted to go back to two things that we said earlier that I think is really important. And I wanted to temper one of Colin's points, which I also agreed with Colin on this. But I think I tend to agree, and I guess Jaffe would too. I don't want to speak for Jaffe, but I think a lot of the stuff of going after sort of that sort of like vampire hunter, sort of witch hunty tactics of going after Trump for all these different things. I think a lot of that stuff could be construed as witch hunty, but I do think the January 6th thing is particularly problematic. But I also think that we're in dangerous waters potentially here, because I think it's still very important to hold Trump accountable and call his character into question wherever that's applicable, checks and balances. And I do think we're kind of treading into dangerous waters here with somebody who seems to have completely bucked the system and still garnered the support of the masses, despite, as you guys said earlier, acting in at least at best.
Maybe what it does is it exposes the system's bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's performative. End of the day, people want to get theirs, and more importantly, that's being cynical, but end of the day, people want to make sure they're taken care of, and everything else, like again, the hierarchy of needs. When you've got your food on the table, the rent, the mortgage is paid, the insurance is covered,
we could overlook.
Then you can worry about, hey, morally this isn't right. But I think his character, I do think he's a piece of shit. I think he's a piece of walking garbage as a human. I think it's clear he's a rapist. He may very well have been a rapist with underage people. And I think he's just a dick. And I think he shouldn't represent our country. But I think people are willing to always look the other way.
Yeah.
As long as they can make sure they're going to be taken care of. And it sucks that that's who we are as a species, but that's who we are as a species.
Yeah.
Right
and
now.
it's understandable.
And hopefully we'll survive long enough to evolve out of it, but who knows?
And it does feel like, sometimes it does feel like we're rewarding bad behavior, but everything Jaffe just said.
That's all that happens. The biggest dog gets the bone. It's same as it ever was right now.
Jaffe, the other thing you said that I really want to speak to is the Democratic Party. And is it over? And I got to be honest with you, from my perspective, I can't even believe the degree in some way of this sky is falling mentality. Like, it's just time for the Democrats to regroup. I think it would be really nice, kumbaya shit and everything else, John Lennon and all that kind of crap. Imagine, right? I think it is literally time for both parties to reach across the aisle, not just the Democrats, not just the Republicans. That's what I would love to see. But I think this is regrouping time
parties
for the party.
Is what I would like to see. The fact is, what we see in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
I think you could split the Democrats and you could split the Republicans, because there's no reason for some people who vote Republican to be voting with MAGA. And there's no reason a lot of people who are progressive lefties like me need to be voting with some of these folks who are in the Democratic Party either.
Mm-hmm.
I just think our system is such that I don't know how we ever get to a system without these two parties being the only choices. But it's a real shame, because it's ridiculous that we're denied options. Like Bernie Sanders, whether you like him or not, he should have been a real meaningful candidate. But the Democrats wouldn't have it.
I think we realized
and
that
there was
now
nowhere for him to go.
Yeah. It's only hindsight being 2020.
In hindsight, he could have won.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
I've listened to him a lot. He gave an interview. God, who was he on? He was on someone recently. Was it? Oh, no, it was Lex. He was on Lex Friedman.
Mm-hmm.
He gave like an hour interview on that.
I saw
it's
that
like, you know what? This
ago,
dude is interesting. And he does, it is the horseshoe theory, I guess, but it's just populism. It's why I don't think left or right. And this is kind of what you're getting at, Jaffe, is like, it's just insufficient. It's not about left or right anymore. The one thing that I think, and I've been saying this for years, and I'm fucking dead ass right, is it's about up and down. It's about money and class. And it's multicultural, it's multiracial, it's multi-ethnic and religious. It's more than the immutable characteristics that I think the Democratic Party, like the modern Democratic Party, decided to kind of shove down everyone's throats with identity politics and stuff, which I think is profoundly unpopular. I mean, you can see from, and again, these are exit surveys, but it's like a thing that drove some Latino men is just the Latinx shit.
Yes.
It's like, what is this? Like, what are you doing?
You can't blame the Democrats for I mean, that's Karl Rove's playbook. He's the one who started all that shit. But still, yeah, in this case, you're right. But,
but I don't like that. I don't like that attitude either, because it reminds me a little bit of, it's like, dude, I'm cognizant of how many people were saying defund the police and doing all that kind of stuff and how profoundly unpopular that was. And it's like, we didn't mean that. And then we didn't say that, and that wasn't real and stuff. And I'm like, okay. I mean, it probably helped cost you elections, but
absolutely did help cost them. And it was terrible why they named it that, because I agreed with it when you got down to what they were actually saying policy wise, but it was allowed because of this incredibly stupid name to make people think the Democrats were like, we don't want police ever again. We want to totally take all their money away. And then what? Like no one who was serious was saying that, but it was called defund the police, which was absolutely batshit insane that you would choose to call it that. But here we are.
Just like, you know, the all men stuff and all, it's just like, it's like, wow, dude. And like the total identitarian attack on white men specifically by popular culture, I think has ramifications in what you see in the election. I saw something really interesting where it's like, imagine you were like a 13 or 14-year-old and Me Too began, and then it was like the Trump revolution, and then you were kind of talked about as if you were like the worst common denominator at nexus in the political stratification of people and race and gender and all that kind of stuff. And then it's like, oh, will you come vote for us? It's like, are you really surprised that young white boys who are called the devil basically by popular culture are not interested in your movement? And that people that like Latino men who are confused by the messaging of, well, who's going to pick your crops if we send them back? And how can a Latino person vote against the interest of their racial group as if they're not Americans? This is the failure of intersectionalism. Like, that's a major thing that people should take away from this. It doesn't account for, it's just nonsensical. And it comes off.
But I do think we do need to answer the question, who is going to pick the crops?
Hopefully,
because it's a real fucking question.
Yeah, it is. But do you want to have, like, this whole argument boils down to having an underclass of people that don't belong here to do things that we don't want to do, and that's not tenable. That's basically indentured servitude, if not slavery.
And we have no problem with it as long as the cost of goods are low. We can. It goes back to the Democratic thing where you're talking about being performative. We don't really care as long as they're the ones doing the work. Our costs go down. That's just it. That's the problem.
That's why it's business, dude. Business owners want this. This is why, like, when you hear about people, you get 2/3 of people not saying they're against illegal immigration. It's way higher than that. You get 2/3 of people, like we said earlier, saying like deport all of them. I mean, that's insane. No one agrees. Like I said, agrees on anything like that. And you get that because everyone realizes, I think, what it is. It's people in positions of power taking advantage of cheap labor, and cheap labor taking advantage of the fact that the dollar goes really far in their native countries and they can repatriate that money. So I don't blame anyone for coming over here. It needs to stop with the business owners and making it really basically impossible to hire these people. And I also believe this, and this is something that I can say because I have money and I appreciate that. But it's like, I would rather pay a little more for everything and have full employment in America.
Sure.
You know, I'd rather have tariffs on cars where people made cars, you know, here, and they can support their families and they can support the cafes down the street, and the cafes can send their kids to school, and the kids can pay for school lunch, and the whole trickle down that comes from that. And I just think it's so like, yeah, I'd rather pay $1.50 for my onion than $1.25 and have it picked by an American. Sure.
Right.
You know,
but what do you think is going to happen? Like, seriously, because it seems like there's a conflict that's going to happen. You're going to have Trump, who ran on this wildly popular 2/3 of send everybody home.
Ugh, so
and
gross.
You're also going to have Trump, who ran on business and the economy, where these business leaders are saying, if you send everybody home, we're going to have to raise prices, which is another reason a lot of people voted for him. Right? I mean, those two things can't live together, can they?
No, not necessarily. I agree with you.
So what do you think's going to happen?
I think Elon Musk was kind of accurate when he said, like, if we do these things, it's going to be painful. It's not unlike what happened when Reagan came into office, not with immigration, but like the economy was really bad when Reagan took over from Carter, and it got worse. And it wasn't until the last year of his first term that he pulled it out. People thought he was going to get wiped out in 1984 originally, like when the race started taking shape. And I think the hope is that we would get into a position like that. Like, the thing that bothers me, and I know this is hard to communicate and I know it's hard to deal with. We were talking about people having the immediate problems in front of them and they can't deal with the academic shit, right? And I totally get that. But the only way to fix the problems before us is to institute pain. And we keep putting it off in some ways. Like, think about 2008, how catastrophic that was. But we kind of didn't let it fail. We put a bunch of money into it and it never really solved itself, if you believe in free markets. But
don't you think everybody needs to participate in the pain? I think that's the problem.
Yes,
I
think so. Definitely. Definitely they need to part. But I guess the point I'm making, it reminds me of what Social Security and Medicare. I was going through Trump's platform, and one of the things I was like, that annoyed the fuck out of me about it was like protecting Social Security and Medicare with no cuts, no age increases, whatever. And I'm like, that's just hogwash, dude. Like,
well, unless you raise taxes on people who are making, you know, $1 million a year, 500,000 a year. I mean, they should get some pain too. If your onion is going to be 150 instead of 125, and I don't care and you don't care, but a lot of other people do, maybe we should have a share in that.
I agree with you. What I'm saying is that the only way any of these problems get fixed, it's the same thing with the deficit, right? Yeah. And the debt. It's like, you only solve this problem by cutting spending, and that's going to hurt, you know, but like the only other option is to not cut spending. And then you find out what happens, I guess. And we find ourselves in similar situations like that all over the place. And I think if we normalize cheapness above all else, without any optic into why things are cheaper, how things become cheaper, how things become affordable, then we just have a self-fulfilling prophecy where we might as well say, like, we actually need to let more illegal immigrants in, and we should take advantage of them to the maximum degree, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. Put them on FICA.
Or Trump needs to say, hey, if I'm going to do this, Musk is going to take some pain too, because what's going to happen otherwise is, I mean, I don't know if it'll bring about a revolution, but can you imagine if it gets worse for your average American for the next 3 or 4 years, but all of these guys, the Bezoses, the Musks, the Trumps, all of these guys, the Zuckerbergs, are absolutely raking in even more because Trump refused to hurt those guys, but he hurt everybody else. I mean, that's off with their heads, let them eat cake time, it seems to me.
I understand that. I think what I'm saying is more academic, where it's like, to institute any of these changes, it's going to be messy. And if we don't want to do it, and I think we do, maybe people don't understand the full ramifications of it. And I don't even understand the full ramifications of it, but I would rather work towards a situation where Americans are working in America, making decent wages, much higher than they're making now. And that would have some natural inflationary pressure, I guess, but at least it wouldn't be coming from government spending or all of this stupid shit that got us into this position to begin with. And instead it was to try to fix a major problem, because if we don't fix this economic problem, we might as well accept that we have a caste system and just move on. And
Let me ask you guys this question.
Yeah.
And maybe this has been answered, and maybe I'm missing something, and maybe I'm wrong about it. I'm sure this has been explored, and maybe I just missed it. But why can't we just implement whatever border policies, reasonable border policies now? And the people maybe just take a knee on the people that are here that, I'm sorry to say, exploited the holes in our system. You know what I mean? I'm not justifying it. And I say this without a racist bone in my body, but they're here already. Now we're going to mass deport people that are, already here. Why can't we just implement?
That's going to cost a lot of money too, by the way.
What would?
The mass deportations.
Get on the mics, dude.
The mass deportations, the building the centers, the hiring more cops, ICE people, all of that shit.
The mass deportation thing
that's not free.
Doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense.
And let people come in that still want to work, regardless of the job, a high-paying job, a low-paying job. Let immigrants come in if they want to come in the right way, do it the right way, implement policies that make sense for everybody going forward. But to deport everybody, it seems, I hate to label it this way, but it seems completely un-American to me. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think
it's almost like an internment camp or something. That's what it feels like to me.
I think people agree with you. I think a lot of people agree with you, but I think this is, again, it goes back to the same thing I'm saying. It's like, so just don't do anything about it, I guess.
I think we should do something about it, but I think like I said, I will be so pleased if everybody takes a hit. That would be great, but I don't think that's going to happen.
My hope is that no one takes a hit and there's some sort of like orchestrated way that some of these things can be done. But I guess what I'm saying is that,
no, I mean, on the cost of an onion.
Oh, no, I understand. I think it's all what I'm speaking to is everything interrelated to each other, where it's like, yes, there's going to be a cost to making things right because we've let things fester for so long. And it's not, dude. I agree with you. There is something I used to say about it. Like, I was like, how is this going to go down? Like, how are you going to deport people? But the reality is and there are ways to do it. Like I was reading some of the stuff about like paying people to leave. Like all sorts of things you can do, but it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, you don't belong here. And like, literally you don't belong.
This is what Vance says. This is his thing. And
no other country in the world would ever let people get away with this shit of any consequence.
That
Maybe
is
some like
true.
Shitty fucking Republic in Africa or whatever lets people pour over its borders. I have no idea, but like a country like the United States, no way, man. Like, you can't even go to China without a visa, nonetheless, just fly there and just get let in at customs. You know what I mean? So, and I'm not saying I want that either. I want immigration too. You have to have immigration. And the United States is built on immigration. It's
100%.
Immigration is good.
I would love to see, just for this, like the thing that breaks your heart, or at least for me, are the people that are escaping such awful situations. And I would love to see, Mexico and America just go, look, let's build these centers and let's make sure if you have escaped from some horrible town, some horrible country in South America, and you do not want to go back, your kids, you will be murdered, you will be raped, blah, blah, blah. You might be murdered and then raped. You never know with these places. So you're not coming into America. You're not going to be a suck on the system other than Mexico and America are going to somehow pay for these centers. And it's like, they're not going to be, the Grand Wailea on Maui, but you're not going back and you're not going to get your throats cut. At least that to me would be, frankly, the Christian thing to do, the American thing to do. But instead we paint them as, it's like we would do the same goddamn thing. We would do the same fucking thing.
We definitely would.
We were in their situations, and
we definitely would. I don't blame them.
We're too connected as a world now to just be so isolationist that it's like, sucks to be you that you didn't get the good dice and get born here. It's like, yeah, it does.
Yeah,
so let's not be assholes.
Too connected, too powerful, and too influential. I mean, especially in the United States, it's just you can't. For me. You just can't.
Me too.
Well, I think the first step is sealing the border and making sure no one else comes in.
Practically, how do you do that? Is that possible? You really think?
I mean, you can definitely do it. You just need personnel. I don't even think it's about the wall. I mean, the wall should be built. I mean, it would be nice to have a wall across the entire thing. I don't think that that's really practical, but it's like, no, you can man it and have more people, and there can be consequences for things too. Like people just kind of, if you get in, you're kind of just in. I mean, they turn very few people away. I think it's like 8% or something actually gets sent back if they have an asylum claim.
They should build those giant dolls like in Squid Game. And if you run and you have to stop.
Right, stop.
And if you make it in, you're in. Come on, then they can broadcast
make it a game.
God,
I like it.
I like that people always say that make it into a game of Alien versus Predator, where you have like you like let them in, and it's like the illegal aliens have to fight our predator population
so
of like.
It's like that movie, The Hunt.
A Black Mirror.
I'd watch the shit out of that.
Yeah. Here's the thing: is like, I just think I think a lot of what's happened with immigration has been a choice, obviously, and what I don't really understand is why they let this happen. It's egregious, dude. I mean, if you just look at the numbers, it's crazy. It's crazy how many people have come in the last 4 years. When people say like there's 10, 11 million illegals in the United States, it's like you are out of your fucking mind if you think that that's true. I think the number is more like 30, probably something like that.
What do you attribute it to, though? Because I want to ask you this, because I think it's ludicrous. When they say, when the Democrats get I mean, it's nuts to me. The idea that, the Democrats want open borders. No, they don't. The idea that most Democrats are not, including me, as progressive lefty as you get, the idea that it's like, just come on in, we don't give a shit. That's not accurate.
Yeah,
so my question to you is, if you're talking 30 million, 20 million, 10 million, what do you think the real, is it literally the political boogeyman of, they want to steal votes? If that was the case, Harris would have won. Because if you got 30 million of these people, even if, a fifth of them would have voted illegally, she would have been in the White House come January.
Yeah, I don't think it's...
So what's the reason that they all were able to come in under the Democrats? What did they want? Was it the businesses wanted more labor?
I really don't know.
I think it's probably something to do with labor, but I think, again, it's a choice. Like they rescinded all of the Trump era policies that were keeping people from coming here.
Right.
And then they didn't do anything about it, and they just let it happen. So yeah, there has to be a reason. I think it's kind of reductionist to say it was for them to vote now. I think a lot of the impetus could be on them voting later.
I've heard that.
I mean, that's a hell of a long-term game plan, but okay, that's
not an uncommon, Jaffe. That
okay,
argument goes
but
all
let's
the way
assume
back to the 80s.
that may be the case. Okay,
yeah,
is there any other logical reason that they would?
The only other logical reason is labor. Okay. And maybe a third reason is identity. And like you're saying that Democrats don't support open borders, but the most vocal leftist contingent of the Democratic Party absolutely does.
Okay, and the most vocal contingent of the right also supports, if you ask Clarence Thomas, supports you can't have a black man and a white woman being married.
Oh yeah, what do they
call
that?
He's married to a fucking white woman.
That's
interracial
insane.
marriage.
Yeah, but there's a name for it, right?
Idiocy.
I can't think of it.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, you can find people on the fringes of either party that support insane things. But
wouldn't you? But wait. Wouldn't the policy at the border suggest that those people are in power in the left wing party? Because why would they let that happen otherwise? That was a choice.
Well, yeah. But what I'm saying is, I don't think it's because the third option you're bringing up, which is they just want open borders. I think it's more. My gut would tell me it's business, and it's the people who really run this country, the oligarchs, that are saying, don't fucking fuck with our business, motherfucker, or we'll cut you politically. And we need these people to work, and we need them to be generational workers, and we don't want them to be legal. We want them to keep working for pennies. That to me seems the most Occam's razory of it, right? It's always coming back to the money.
I think so. I mean, I think that, and that's dark as fuck, and we should do something about that.
Welcome to America. Welcome to the world.
And as far as the rest of the world, I said this to you on the last time we talked, is like, I was getting into the posture where I'm so tired of hearing about the rest of the world, that it's like, what about us? What about our people? What about our poor? What about our veterans? What about like people are going into New York City getting debit cards, crossing the border in Mexico, from Mexico to Texas, getting flown to New York City, put up in a hotel and given a debit card. it's astounding that we're letting this happen to us, and it's an outrage. And
you're right. But that would hold a whole lot more weight if when the Republicans were in office, or anyone who believed what you're saying was in office on either side, actually did show up for the Americans. If it's like, you know what, when the Republicans are in office, look what happens to infrastructure. Look what happens to education. Look what happens to health. Holy shit, people aren't having to take 3 jobs because their mom has cancer. But that's not what we're seeing. So again, what we're seeing is that's the message of the Republican Party, which is, hey man, we're doing this because what about us? But when they actually take power, it's the rich people that get all of those goodies in goodie bags, and everybody else gets thrown under the bus. If there was a party that actually delivered on that, then I would agree with you, but they don't actually deliver on it. That's the messaging they sell.
Well, yeah, I agree with you there. I think that's why we have to we don't have to do anything, but let's let it play out a little bit and see what is the first day, what is the first week, what is the first 100 days, like what is the route towards preparation to get the executive orders to sign, to get Congress in order to pass things. Yeah. And the stopgap is going to be Democrats being able to filibuster in the Senate, which is good. I mean, that's part of the function of the body, but that's going to be the thing that stands in between them and really kind of going crazy on this stuff, which may be good or bad depending on how you look at it. But I think that those are the major issues. It's like foreign policy seems to be fucked up. People don't like it. Immigration is fucked up. People don't like it. The economy is fucked up. People don't like it. Inflation's fucked up. People don't like it. The culture war stuff is fucked up. People don't like it.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's as I said, like Biden would have gotten steamrolled even worse.
I think so too.
I think a better Democrat may have won, but I think the funny thing is that a better Republican would have obliterated them. Like it just required, but it doesn't matter at this point. You got to tip your cap. I mean, you don't have to, but I tip my cap to Trump as a political operator. That dude, I mean, I don't know what else to say about what he did.
It's hard to give props to someone who has recognized how stupid. That's wrong. That's not fair. It's hard to give props to someone. It feels like they're stupid, but they're not stupid. They're just tired and they're busy and they don't have bandwidth, a lot of them. And he gets it. He gets marketing. He gets messaging better than the Democrats do. The Democrats are too much up in their own heads, and he goes for a gut message and it works. It doesn't matter if it's true. Yeah.
He's gotten better.
I read a great book recently about Vince McMahon and his relationship with Trump. And it's amazing how similar they are in terms of knowing exactly what the middle of the road people want, even if it's horseshit. They just want to be told what they think they want to be told. And everybody gets rich except the people who, are in the middle of the road. So, I mean, I'm with you on that. You got to give props to that, but it's kind of, it's tragic, but that's where we are.
Let me ask you guys a couple of things. I have like 3 bullet points I wanted to pick your brains on, if you don't mind.
I have 2, but yes, continue, please.
One thing that's been fascinating me and that I have been paying attention to, traditionally we talk about the influence of mass media, right? Talk about TV, the radio, then satellite radio came along. And of course we always had the newspapers, and then eventually it was YouTube, and then all the big media outlets have their subscription services. But I've been really keen on the outside influence, specifically others too, but especially of Joe Rogan and Elon Musk. And maybe for the first time seeing the power, I know it's only been 4 years, but seeing the power of the podcast specifically. And maybe this is the first time, or the first time in a long time, we're seeing that pop culture influence of that magnitude coming from the right. And I want to know, in your guys' opinion, how much Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, and others swayed this election.
I think Elon Musk was instrumental in this election. I think buying X, or Twitter, which he turned into X, was essential to the win. And I think that annoys some people because it's definitely true. But it was just breaking down a piece of the wall. Like the right wing got one piece of it and is clawing their way into the mainstream space after being alienated and isolated from it. And I know that full well myself. That's why I built something like Last Stand to begin with. Not that we're really politically, ideologically motivated, but I like Elon Musk a lot. In fact, I like the whole crew of people that I like the whole crew of people generally that Trump surrounds himself more than Trump. You know, whether it's RFK, who I like, you know, I've always liked Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's great. You know, Doug Burgum's interesting, and so on and so forth. I like Ramaswamy. I think he should run for governor in Ohio. I think he would win. But it felt like the evening of the odds in some way by approaching things from two different sectors, where you have the mainstream media very much in the Harris camp to a comical degree. And then you have like a more free thinking, unideologically based. So it could be anything. There are prominent left-wing podcasts and podcasters, of course, and streamers, but it just is what it is. These micro communities. I think it ended up being essential. And that was one of the things that I think honestly exposed Harris. There is no reality where I think Kamala Harris could do a 3-hour Rogan podcast. I'm being honest with you. Like, I don't think she could do it. And the reason I don't think she could do it is because she fucking didn't.
She told Rogan she would do 45 minutes and
it's a joke
on her, right?
Yeah. And they would maybe go to her and stuff like that. And it's like, that's not the way it works. Right. Like, you come into the space and you sit down for a wide ranging conversation and you didn't do it because you can't. And I think it's been a useful way to long form content generally, I think has been a major boon to understanding issues for politicians to listen. I was fascinated by listening to RFK while he was running about a lot of the different things. I don't agree with him about many things, but he's a fascinating, knowledgeable, active participant in situations around him, and has been, you know, especially in the environmental space, a hero of sorts.
Passionate.
And I like seeing people kind of step up with heterodox ideas coming together that don't even really agree on things, like a Tucker Carlson and Tulsi Gabbard and an RFK don't really have much in common, except for probably a level of populism and patriotism and real monofocus on certain things, whether it's with RFK, with environmental stuff and the FDA and food and all that. And I think that's good. And I think it's kind of mixed things up in some way. It's like the Republican Party has become like environmentally conscious in some way, or more than it has been in a long time. You know, you hear the Republican nominees saying things like, we want clean air and clean water and beautiful land and all that. It's like, you never even heard Republicans say that kind of shit, which is crazy. And then you have like kind of the populist wing, the isolationist, anti-war, pro-worker, blue collar. It's very weird, you know, how this has all come out. It's truly strange. And it's quite the operation to bring that group of people together to get a plurality of the vote, you know, or a majority of the vote.
Let's see if they actually can govern that way, though. I mean, even the environment. I mean, Musk is all global warming is real, and Trump's like, oh, it's a hoax. I'm like, you know, can they actually hold together to get anything done? You know, whether we've talked about the immigration versus business, but even take RFK, where I heard him yesterday on the news talking about Fruit Loops specifically. He mentioned Fruit Loops, and he said, you know, if you go to Canada, and I wasn't aware of this, and maybe this isn't totally accurate, maybe he means a brand of Fruit Loops, but the way he pitched it was, in Canada, there's literally 3 or 4 ingredients in Fruit Loops, and in America, there are like, you know, 40.
Yeah, that's true.
All these chemicals and stuff, right? So is Trump really going to go to Kellogg's and go to these cereal companies and risk the ire of the lobbyists and the contributions and say, you know what, you got to make your Fruit Loops taste a little less addictive. And I know you guys know that aspartame in Diet Coke, we all have looked the other way and said that it's totally not cancer causing, but we're going to have to get that out of there. And Coke's like, okay, fine, go fuck you. We'll donate money to someone else, right? I mean, that's going to be the question. All these disparate causes you're saying are great if they can actually work
It's
together.
A lot of masters to serve.
Yeah, it's my hope, and it could be naive, but that like we are as I said earlier, one of the great advantages of having the non-consecutive term limited re-election for the first time ever is just the implicit lame duckness of it. And that if there's got to be a level of not caring what the results are. This was kind of the posture of the Democrats when they passed the Affordable Health Care Act, when they knew it was over. for them. What they were doing was going to destroy the caucus, and they were going to lose. And they did in the midterms. But they just were like, we got to do it. Like, we're here and we can do it. And it is my hope that, dude, I would love a populist hero like president that went and fucking destroyed these big businesses and raised, taxes on, on where it makes sense, and, be the champion of the little man. Do I think that that's going to happen? Probably not. But I think the political capital thing is kind of nice because there's nothing to worry about there, as long as you understand that it's going to have down ballot ramifications on the House and the Senate. But you got to do what you got to do. Otherwise, what's the fucking point? And I hope that he realizes that. I hope they realize that with the wars. I hope they realize that with the border and immigration. Like, just fucking do it, and just let's see what happens. And if you get wiped out, you get wiped out, but at least you did what you said you were going to do, and he should absolutely be held accountable if and he will be. I mean, the rubber band effect, like a lot of people held their nose and voted for him. There's no doubt. Yes, and if they feel like they look like a fucking asshole, that's not going to portend well.
Well, what do you think about the Affordable Care Act? I mean, he's said time and again, he wants it gone. He wants, pre-existing conditions back. He's willing to do that. That's not going to go over well. Nobody wants that.
No, I think it would be, the whole idea, going back to Romney, of replacing the Affordable Care Act is interesting as long as the replacement makes sense. I actually really like the Affordable Care Act. I always have.
Most people do.
I use it now. I mean, I've used it for years because I buy my own healthcare since I left Kind of Funny. So this will be my 8th year, I guess, of buying my own healthcare. And I use those exchanges, and they're useful. They're expensive, but because it costs what it costs. But I like that. It's like there's a limit to how much you can be charged, that you can have any pre-existing condition. It's the entire idea of insurance. So I have no patience for these insurance companies, whether it's health insurance or car insurance or house insurance. Like, they can all go fuck themselves.
It's nuts.
And we do need to do something about that. Jaffe, we've talked about it in the past. I'm actually quite liberal on the idea of even having universal health care. Yeah. I just need to know how it would work. And I'm not convinced it would. But I would love to. That would be ideal. It would be true. I'm not one of these guys that's like, no, the ideal is everyone has private health insurance and you have to pay out of pocket for this. It's like, no, it's fucking horrible. If you really think that you can do better, then do it. But I think it's
my
hard.
Theory is, and again, this is all just drama at this point. I know nothing, but I think he'll be dead in a year. I honestly think if you're the Republican Party, I think there are a lot of puppet masters in all these parties. And I think he now, because he is a lame duck, and Vance is positioned now to basically be their guy for the next 8 years after this, I think someone's going to kill him, and I think it's going to be them, frankly. I have no evidence. I'm not saying that would be a good thing. I'm just saying that he almost seems I have nothing to lose. But I could be wrong. I'm just throwing that out there.
I mean, maybe. I mean, the assassination, it shows you what a crazy
twice.
Yeah, it's like it shows you what a crazy situation is that like he. The second one is a little more dubious. It was going to happen, I guess, but the first one's nuts.
Oh, it's crazy.
He almost got his head blown off. It was crazy, and maybe you're right. I wonder if they would be so strategic. Like, I think the rule is if the president makes it through the first half of his term and then dies or is like, incapacitated, then the rest of the term doesn't count for the VP, meaning that that Vance could be president for 10 years.
Wow.
Potentially,
who's his next in line for who would become vice? I don't even know who it is.
There's no next in line.
The House of Representatives, if everyone died at the same time, would be third, but otherwise it would just be a vacancy and you'd have to pick a new vice president. And there have been times where there's been no vice president, like many years.
Wow.
Or Kiefer Sutherland
back in the day. Like, I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to think. Like, someone's vice president was it like Chester Arthur or something, like died in the first year and then they just never replaced him.
Because if the president dies, it goes to the House, right?
The House, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
So, and I think that happened with when John Tyler took over for William Henry Harrison, which was the first time a president died in office. I don't think they had a vice president then his entire term either. And you should, if you guys are interested in history, it's a fascinating story about him taking over because no one really knew how it worked. It's really, really interesting. Like, they would ask, like, they didn't really know. There's all sorts of legislation and stuff. It's like, are you the president or are you like the acting president? are you, what happens to the vice presidency? They used to they called John Tyler your accidency. Because they never really thought it was going to happen.
That's what I call one of my kids, but I'm not going to tell you which one.
So anyway, is there anything else you guys want to chat
about?
Yeah,
I have two quick things.
Go ahead,
one
Jeff.
is I heard, and I thought this is fascinating to me. I heard Mark Cuban on Bill Maher talking about AI. And what he said was really interesting, because I know that the Democrats are in favor of a lot of regulation on it. And I think a lot of people would go, yeah, that's probably a good thing. He says, but here's the reason a lot of these tech bros were voting for Trump. He said, because, yeah, they're going to make a lot of money. And that's the big thing. He said, but, and Bill Maher's like, well, do you support it? He says, yes, only because China's not going to have any regulation on artificial intelligence. And all it takes is someone to kind of split the AI atom and really get the winner of what it means to have AI. And you can influence the world in a matter of days with that. And so it starts to make more sense. And I don't know how to feel about that, because I absolutely think it should be regulated. It's too fucking powerful. But if your enemies are not regulating it, and it is, that's some scary shit. So I just wanted to bring that up, because I did think, even though I tend to disagree with 90% of the Republicans on policy, on that one, if I had to choose, I got Mark Cuban's point, and I think it's a good one, because China's not going to play nice with that shit.
Absolutely not.
What do you guys think? I mean, do you think on the AI stuff, I don't mean like AI art, I just mean all of it,
Yeah.
I listened to that podcast, All In, which I really think is great, with those tech entrepreneurs. And they were talking about AI in an interesting way, where they were like, we actually have a major, maybe many years advantage on China in terms of AI language modeling and all of that, as long as we can keep it proprietary and maybe just beat them to the punch in some way that it makes their research irrelevant. But it reminds me a little bit of the environmental policy in the world, like the Paris Accord and all of that, where it's hard to get everyone to agree on a set of rules. You can't even get people to really agree on nuclear proliferation at this point, because it affects everyone differently. So it's easy for us to say, like, we need to have this level of CO2 in the air, and then a country like India goes like, you guys already had your industrial period. It's not really fair for you to now tell us we can't have our industrial period now that you're ready with green energy, and we won't be there for 50 years. And that's why things don't change. So it is very hard to get any sort of agreement, and maybe we shouldn't. I feel like even space, I think, is going to be broken open really bad. And we have a bunch of agreements with space that we definitely aren't even paying attention to anymore. Like, we're not supposed to weaponize space. We're not supposed to do, like, there's obviously all sorts of fucked up things in space, and we're going to be going there more and more, and we should be. And the Trump administration is very pro-space, which is awesome. But it's like, yeah, I think we either have to come with more multilateral accords that maybe don't include everyone, but many people, or just certain actors. Like, maybe it's not important to have more than just us and China and a few other countries even have an accord about AI, because no one's going to get to the end result anyway. And maybe we court them in some way. But it reminds me a lot of environmental policy in that way, where it's like, yeah, man, it's kind of fucked up when you're trying to get your country out of a hole and you can't burn coal. It's like, you guys burned coal for 200 years, It's like, so it's tough. And that's that both leads to and portends bad for isolationism, since everyone's in a different place anyway, but we have to share this rock.
Well, up until Wednesday, what's happening Wednesday?
What?
In the House.
Oh,
come on now.
What do you mean?
Wednesday is the next UFO UAP hearing.
Oh, it is. I don't even know that.
Oh yeah. So you never know. They're gonna start blowing some lids.
I'm kind of like, whatever at this point. Like, not that I don't think it's interesting, but it's just like, say it and show it, or shut the fuck up. Like, I'm tired of this.
Some of this stuff about why they're not. I mean, it's how much of it's conspiracy, I don't know, but they're like, look, we have what do they call it? Like 0 point energy. It's like the all this stuff we know. And even some of these guys like at Lockheed, if we told you what we have, anything you can imagine, we probably are already doing. But the minute you come out and say, oh yeah, we can basically get you from one side of the country to the other in the blink of an eye, or okay, maybe not the blink of an eye, but within minutes, all the energy all over the world falls apart. All the auto falls apart. I mean, it would have massive ramifications. So apparently the word is people are being erased because the powers that be do not want this out there. And so that's kind of why you're seeing even the thing that Schumer put forward, the UAP Act, and the whistleblower protection. There's always one or two of these guys on these committees that kind of stop it from going forward. And it's like, and their names, and it's like, why can't this even be brought up for a vote? And they just won't allow it. And they're saying it's because of energy policy. So who knows, man? But it'll be that's Wednesday, so that's where I'll be.
Cool. I didn't even know that was happening. I kind of lost touch with that. I wasn't paying deep attention to the politics either leading into the election. Yeah. I was listening to certain shows and following certain things, but I wasn't even really that engaged.
Well, it takes a long time to get a platinum trophy by following a list that you've printed out.
Oh, definitely.
I understand.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. I just heard, who's the world's smartest man? He's got the highest IQ, Chris Langan.
I don't even know.
He was just talking about all the new space stuff coming up, and he's actually kind of he's not so bullish. He's like he's an interesting dude because he's supposedly the smartest man in the world, pound for pound IQ wise, right? But he's all into like demons and angels exist, but aliens don't. It's very interesting.
Well, they're saying that some of the people believe that's what that is.
That's what this is.
There's a spiritual side to it.
That's interesting, dude.
Yeah,
it's fucking sick. I love it. I still think it's humans from another time.
I think that too. It's hard not to think that.
And it's probably in the same space on Earth.
Yeah.
So they're cropping through timelines.
Yeah.
Just randomly.
And we were there. A lot of it is that we were planted, that we are basically DNA manipulated by them, and they're checking up on us. And I mean, it's who the fuck
It's
knows?
good shit, but it's just like, I watch this stuff, some really great interviews, but it's just like, spit it out. I am sick of it's like, well, I have permission from the Pentagon. It's like, I don't give a fuck about the Pentagon, dude. Like, what is going on with this stuff? Just someone say it. The thing that bothers me, and I know this is crazy to like ask someone to basically sacrifice themselves, but it's like one of these people just needs to say it.
That's right. And we send people to fucking war, 20-year-old kids to war to sacrifice themselves. You'd think one of these motherfuckers who's like 60, who's had an entire life of privilege could go, you know what? Fuck it. I'll be willing to have my car explode when I leave the interview. Here's what's going on. Just fucking, I agree.
Just give us all the. I like the stories of. You remember when Deep Throat was dying and he revealed who he was.
Yeah,
and it's like, that's cool and I appreciate that, but would have been way more interesting for us to know this now, especially because you short. Yeah, like you were way out of you wouldn't have gotten tried for anything at this point, and it's this stuff. It's like everyone some guy gives us all the alien information. Everyone just fucking protects him. It's like, what are you gonna do? Put him in like some compound somewhere. He's got a piece of the fin from the fucking plane, and he's got a piece of exotic metal alloy and whatever the hell. I'm just so sick of like these guys, and it seems like everyone. It reminds me of fake video game insiders, where it's like everyone is winking and nodding at each other, but no one knows shit.
Yeah, it's a little industry. It's like everything else. They're making money off it, and it's just like. But at least they're having hearings. Maybe we'll learn something. We probably won't, but hey, I'll be tuning in Wednesday. And excited for it. I'll be streaming it. So if Colin's not, you guys need a streaming thing. God damn it, Colin, you guys are behind.
We're thinking about it. It's just we do so much. I gotta sit and figure things out. But streaming. I have a lot to think about.
I'm so worried about AI though, guys. Honestly, I mean, I'm hopeful for some protective policies to be ushered in just to kind of slow it down. But as people that do what I do, there's some semblance of knowing like we're on the clock.
Yeah.
My art director showed me the other day, working on another show, but he's like, oh, I want to show you some development stuff we did before you came back to Nick. And he's showing me these beautiful illustrations. They're like really beautiful painterly atmosphere, environments and background designs and everything. And he didn't tell me. And at the end, he's like, dude, that's all AI. And I was like, fuck me. Yeah. So not only was he asked to do that as part of his development pitch or the deck he was creating, but they asked him to do it in AI. And then my other boss over there was like, he was developing a pitch for a new show, and he said he asked Chat GPT, I guess, to write it. and just kind of plugged in a couple of ideas and let it go. And he was like, dude, it was fucking good. Like the thing it turned around was actually legit good.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like, it's, you know, it's kind of like, I mean, it's what Colin's been saying for the last couple of years. It's the beginning of the end for the way we currently know things.
The way we currently do it. Yeah. Now, I do think the artist and the right, I do think it's ridiculous, and we do need legislation to say, you're not going to put the genie in the bottle, and we don't want to put the genie in the bottle. But if you've trained off this artist, if you've trained off this writer, and it's obvious, put some legislation in place. You don't get to steal shit.
Yes.
But sure, it's out there in the world. I think that's ridiculous that these people don't get paid in credit for basically building this industry. But, that's going to take laws. And again, Trump ain't going to pass those laws.
It's crazy. But yeah, the world, I mean, we were just on college tours with my daughter, and somebody we were talking to at one of the schools in administration was actually saying some of the essays that they're getting, they're actually looking for those telltale signs of something that's written. They'd rather see something written with heart, written poorly, because they know the kid actually did it. That's where we're at right now. Because they're saying we're getting so many things that sound like Hemingway. Kids don't write like this, So it's like this kid's either Faulkner or they just completely used AI.
But it's going to make video game AI so great. I'm serious, man. I was playing Silent Hill 2 Remake and the Maria character. It's like, I would love to have been, because I liked that she was part of the adventure for part of it. And I was just like, it would be so cool. And we're so close. So there's companies already doing it. But at that level that I could have my microphone and I'm playing Silent Hill, and she would always stay in the parameters of the Maria character. It's like a Disney costume character at Disneyland. It's not like the guy playing Star-Lord is going to run around and start, quoting Ronald Reagan. He's Star-Lord, right? He knows the room in which he can run. I was like, that should be so cool. I'm in the strip club with Maria. Tell, what's going on. Talk about, I would love that. And we're getting there. We're very close.
Getting there, dude.
We're very close. So, in fact, there's a military shooter in beta right now where your buddy is an AI. And yeah, you can do things like, hey, go find the green box, go open this door. But you can also be like, holy shit, that was a great firefight. What do you think? And you'll start having a conversation with the guy.
Cool. That's actually pretty cool.
It's gonna make NPCs really emotional when you lose them in battles and shit. It's like, fuck, he was just telling me about his kid. And I got his head blown off. Fuck. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What else? Any other? I mean, the thing is like I don't have nearly as much to say about this as I would in previous years, because I'm just not as surprised by it anymore. And now I'm just and because we're in the interstitial period, now we kind of have to just wait and see.
Sure. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of dark paths it could go down, and I really hope people like you are more right. And a lot of the people I listen to on the left are just scared and chicken littling it. But there's no way to know right now. So you have to kind of, at least if you're me, I compartmentalize it. My guard is always going to be up with this guy. But hey, I'll take some good news. I agree with Dagan. I just, I want again, I used the phrase earlier, but it breaks my heart. I'm so tired of the meanness and the bitchiness, and there are people that are going to take this, and I'm already seeing it on social media as a free card to just go out and just be bullies and racist and assholes. And trolling was already bad enough. And I hope there's something that we can do to stop that or mitigate that, because it's not healthy for any of us. It's really bad for us. And I don't know what the solve is, but I hope that gets tamped down. We'll see.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny. I was experimenting for a long time, as I was saying, on various shows, of posting on Twitter and trying to make money on it now that I got, monetized. And I'm like, I'm not making any money on it, which is fine. I don't really give a shit, but it's not even worth really interacting with it if I'm not, because it is so, it's informative, a stream of consciousness, like I say, but it's so negative and sad. I will say that Twitter might have been the most accurate insight into what was going to happen, though, in some weird way. If you were there, it seemed much more bullish than it probably did in other platforms. But I agree with you. I think that the political sphere is miserable. It's why I didn't want to do political content, generally speaking. It's why, as I've gotten older, and I go into this deeply on the most recent episode of Sacred Symbols, that I've tried to compartmentalize things in my life much more, because I found this this cycle obnoxious from the perspective of everyone. It's just everywhere you look. And I want places, I think everyone does, to be able to not deal with it. And I was getting annoyed that it was kind of getting its way into football and all these things. Like, I think it's even weird that we have the American flag on the field and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Sure. I hate all that shit at these games. Like, I want there to be differentiation between these places. And so I felt like that was really out of control. Like the repudiation of it, I think, was really powerful, of saying, like, I don't give a shit what fucking Brad Pitt wants. I don't give a shit what these musicians want. Beyonce, Taylor Swift, who cares? These aren't real people, like they don't have any idea.
They're as much of a corporation as what Coca-Cola wants.
Yeah. I think Taylor Swift's a very impressive person.
Oh yeah. She's awesome.
Oh yeah.
But it's like, I could give a fuck what you think.
Yes.
You have no clue what's going on out here. You are impossibly, and this is frankly why I really appreciated Elon Musk, because he kind of put his money where his mouth. What'd you say?
It's not like he understands the everyman, and Taylor Swift does.
No, I don't think he does either, but I think he's put his money where his mouth is multiple times now. And
that is true.
And provided a great service to just hopefully have the stream of consciousness that I think X has become. And I think it will be looked back at as instrumental in getting him elected.
I'm still on Twitter just for work, because I have a lot of followers over there, and I can say, hey, a stream is starting. But when I need to sort of feel not like I want to jump off a building, I finally made a Blue Sky account, because I'm just like, I can't.
A lot of people have.
Yeah. I can't be around this toxic shit all day long. It's just not good for me.
It's cool. It's just like, I'm done with social media. If the places I'm at now don't work, which I'm really not anywhere, it's like, I'm done. It's like, I'm not jumping around from place to place. I appreciate that people want that, but I think, what did Twain say? It's like the news about X's death has been,
greatly exaggerated.
Greatly exaggerated. Yeah, that's what it was. Where it's like, X is actually bigger than ever. Twitter is bigger than ever. And
I don't care if it goes away. I just don't want to be there as much.
Well, no, I don't either, because I just feel like it is negative, it's cyclical, and it's useful, but it comes at a high cost, I think. And I think that your wear on it's going to vary as well, depending on who you are. Like, what kind of constitution do you have to even deal with what people say to you on there, and the things you read and shit, and the fucking snuff videos and whatever else you have to come across.
I was in a bookstore last night, and it was so pleasant to be in a bookstore and reading, and it was quiet. And I said to the person I was with, I said, and I did, here it is. I said, I'm going to start keeping a book by my computer instead. And when I feel that urge to go into social media, which I just do.
Me too.
I'm just going to read a little bit.
That's smart, Jaffe.
Because my brain was like, oh, you remember this. It's like having a home cooked nutritious meal after eating nothing but McDonald's for like a year. And you're like, oh, wait.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
We'll see if it holds. But right now I got my book right here. So maybe I'll be all right. We'll see.
What do you think? You guys satisfied with where we left it?
Yeah, I personally, I think it's a great conversation. It's hard for me to get too crazy about defending Trump, because again, it's more about the messaging behind what he was trying to do, and that it seems to line up with a platform that I can support, and really just being against the construct that was Kamala Harris. Like, I just couldn't deal with it. And it was crazy to me that it was that close, but I think that that's a sign of how weak Trump actually was. But now I'm kind of in a holding pattern, and I'm optimistic. Like, I think it can go both ways. Like, he's learned a lot. You can just tell in this campaign how much better the campaign was, you know?
Yep.
And how much more relatively disciplined he was. So maybe it translates into a more statesman doer of tasks in the limited time that he has, because it's over after this. Like, there's this idea that he's going to like fucking run again. It's like, no, he's not. It's literally like, how is that going to happen? It's not going to happen. It's impossible. It would be over. I mean, he would basically an extra constitutional thing. kind of like how Putin ran again in Russia. And I just don't think that the machination, the machine would allow that to happen. So
I think it would be nice, but he's not going to change. If what you're saying is true, part of your responsibility, but he doesn't give a shit about this, but part of your responsibility is to tamp down the way he speaks. Then it's like, you know what? You're the president. You're not you don't get to be the troll on Twitter. I'm sorry that you don't get
decorum, Donald.
Well, just not because it's like, I need my just because it's the nice, responsible thing to do, and you're scaring a lot of fucking people when you say shit like you do. And I get it. It's funny. Liberal tears. Ha, ha, ha. But there's a cost.
He is funny as fuck.
And you can be a dick and go, ha, ha. It reminds me of bullies in high school.
Yeah.
It's like, you can do that. You have every right to do that. But what does that say about you?
Yeah.
That you're scaring a lot of kids. You're scaring a lot of minority groups. And okay, did you get your yucks? Are you done? No? Okay. I mean, what a dick.
Yeah.
What a dick.
It's funny, man. I think that he's endearing to me in a lot of ways. And I think that kind of works towards the humanization of maybe the crazy or crazier elements around him. Like his little dance moves and shit. Like, it's funny. Like, there's no one that's ever acted like this.
Yeah.
And I loved the
clown
McDonald's
is funny though.
By the way, he's the greatest retail politicker ever. It's like not even fucking close. Like the McDonald's thing was a genius S tier level move. The garbage truck was fucking hysterical when he rolled up and he's like, "How do you like my garbage truck?" I'm like, dude, what is going? This is so good. It's so good. And he knows he's funny. That's what I love about it. Is he knows he's funny. So he leans into it. But it's like, I don't care, man. I'm not trying to humanize the president.
I know you don't. And I get that. And that's fine. You don't have to. But I'm saying that you would be mistaken if you think that his rhetoric doesn't make a very large portion of America not feel good or safe about the future of this country. Yeah. And it's okay. He doesn't owe us that, but you got to ask yourself, when you know you're doing that and you continue doing it, or you continue supporting that kind of rhetoric, you have to ask yourself, why are you okay with that?
Cutting the image of this man's portrait hanging in the Hall of Presidents is fucking crazy when you think about it, or maybe it's just a difference of what a president's become over the years. But when you think of that,
and I'm okay with that. I don't need the president to be on some pedestal like, oh, I'm just saying your rhetoric is scaring people and it's hurting people. And wow, I guess you've chosen to be a dick.
Well, let's agree to do this. We're recording this November 8th. So there's going to be 2+ months of transition and all of that. He's going to make his choices, or at least, his nominations for his cabinet and all the rest. We should convene. Obviously, Jaffe will be back on the show before then, but we should convene in January, like early January, the three of us, and just see where we stand. Because we'll have a much better idea.
Wait for a month after he has a month. I mean, January's not going to tell us anything. The only thing we know on January is going to be he's going to lie about the crowd size of his inauguration.
No, I was saying we can do whatever we want, but I was saying that by that point, the construction of his cabinet should be known. We already know who his chief of staff is and all that kind of stuff.
Anytime you guys want to talk, I'm here. And especially if you want to talk politics, I'm here. So yeah, I'm here when you call.
All right, cool. Yeah. So I would like to do that maybe in the first couple of weeks of January, and we'll leave it there. But I want the podcast to be apolitical unless it makes sense, unless it's opt-in. And I like the all political approach,
What do you think of the 3 versus the 4 now that you've gotten to play with it? Do you guys think the audience will like the 3 or the 4, or do you think they'll want to go back to the 4?
The 3 or the 4, what do you?
Podcasters.
I'm sorry. I was thinking when we say 3 or 4, we always talk about PlayStation. So I was
well.
No, I personally I think the 3 flows better personally. I understand people want 4. It's just more quiet time for each person, and it's just a longer show. And I think people get tired. Like I think, listen, dude, I always say podcasting isn't a fucking coal mine. I'm not like dying over here. It's tiring to talk and be engaged. It takes energy. And I want to be good at it. So I think when you start getting to
4 hours,
the 4 hour mark, which Sacred often does, but it loses its mind at the end of the show.
And you must see a drop off too. I mean, the number of people.
Oh yeah, definitely, dude. People bounce around. The average listener of Sacred listens for like 45 minutes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. On YouTube anyway. I'm sure it's more on audio, but
right. Yeah, that's probably
so
true.
Yeah, we make long form content that people can bounce around, and so, but I don't want to get crazy with it, and I think people get tired. So I think 3 is good, but your feedback is welcome. It has nothing to do with finances or anything like that. It's literally just about the show, and what's like and who's available as well.
Yeah,
I think we have to kind of widen. I would like to widen our group of people to get some more people involved, but we just have to look into doing that. And I'm just so busy with other shit all of the time. We're about to release our new game at Lilymo and everything too. So,
woo.
we haven't even announced it yet, but it's ready to go. So I'm just busy. So we'll figure everything out. So keep the feedback coming. But yeah, Dag, I leave it to you to close things out.
All right. Yeah. I mean, guys, going out for goodbyes, can we just mention one more thing? I just have to do it. How much does Dustin look like JD Vance? It's fucking insane to me.
Yeah, quite. People say it. I mean,
you don't see it? I
see it, but he looks like him, I guess, but it doesn't remind me of him necessarily.
It's like 10 years on Dustin.
Yeah, it's like a different shaped face. Like JD Vance has a squatter face.
He does. Yeah, he's like a caricatured version of Dustin.
Yeah, right.
You guys could basically replace JD Vance, tell no one, and have a puppet within the administration.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
Bidding.
I would love that.
He could be. Yeah, like say put Dustin in there when you're afraid he's
you'll know suddenly when all this kind of like weeby shit starts appearing like in policy. It's like every Saturdays, we have to watch Crunchyroll. What? Okay. Sure, JD.
He's the weeb version of JD Vance. Well, that's it, my friends. That's our time. Another one for the record books. I just want to go around and say goodbye to my cohorts over here. Jaffe, I'll start with you, my friend. Goodbye.
I loved it. I appreciate you having me. I like getting, again, this has been a real rough week if you vote like I do and think like I do and my family does. And so it's nice to have conversations with people that it's not just bluster and rhetoric, but it's actual, here's what I think could happen. Here's what I worry about, and I hope the audience that listens that is more like me than Colin, or more like a Democrat voter than what Colin voted for this time, which is the devil. I hope that maybe they find some comfort as I have in that. So thanks for having me. It was fun. And if you like my brand of nonsense, don't forget, find me over on YouTube at my channels and all that good stuff.
Cool, man.
Very nice. Kyle, my friend, it was so good to be with you again. I think it's been probably a month since you and I sat down and did a podcast together.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, thank you for filling. Dustin was gone, obviously, for a horrible reason. And so we were just kind of balancing a lot of things and dealing with new freelancers and doing all of that. So, it's been an interesting time, but I appreciate you guys doing the show in my stead. And I'll try to be on more often. I never was going to be on every week, but I had to come back for this episode, and I'm glad we had the conversation. I hope people found it productive and useful and fair, so that's it. So Dag, thanks for hosting. I appreciate it.
Oh, it was fun. It was a fun conversation. And listen, for everybody out there, just know, win, lose, or draw, we hope you're doing okay. We don't care what your politics are. We love you. And with that, just a bit of housekeeping then. Patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access. As always, best way to avoid the FOMOs, my friend, get in early, get in often, hard and fast. That's how we do it. That's how we do it on LSM. Last Stand
Make sure
Media.
You pull out, because Lord knows you ain't getting an abortion these days.
That's true. Well, you might just have to go across the border to another state.
Right. That'll be healthy.
Right? LastStandMedia.store has the merch. And that's it for Jaffe and Colin. I've been your host, Dagan Dagster Moriarty, saying the sky isn't falling. It's going to be okay. It's not the apocalypse. Love your neighbor. We love you. And until next time, we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
Constellation is a product of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by and is directed and hosted by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is my brother, Dagan Moriarty. The show is produced by Last Stand's executive producer, Dustin Furman, and is edited by associate producer, Ben Smith. All Last Stand theme music is by Ramon Narvaez, and all of our graphics and logos are by Dagan Moriarty. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's podcasts, including Constellation, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest support tier, and we're infinitely grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor.